What do you need?
That box that I put my computer on top of.
Are we good? Okay, we're good.
Okay, perfect. We're going to call this workshop of the Martin County School Board to order.
I wonder if they took it to the office.
If you all would please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm not online. I'm not online.
Okay, Ms. Falls, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Roberts,
I'm here.
Mr. Dieter-Lissing,
Here.
Mrs. Steffenthaler,
Present.
Mrs. Powers,
Here.
Superintendent Gaylord.
Here. And just let the record reflect that Mr. Anderson is not here. I expect him any minute, but,
He's in the parking lot.
okay, perfect. So I'm going to wait just one more minute because he wanted to be here for public comment.
And then also Ms. Steffenthaler's on. the
Yeah,
line.
Mrs. Steffenthaler's on the phone.
It's not in there, in here.
No.
Here he comes.
Here he comes. I'll just perch it, I guess. Okay. All right, while Mr. Anderson's getting settled in, I'm going to read this regarding public comment. Citizen input is vital to the improvement of our district. Most times, your remarks may be listened to without comment from board members or superintendent. This does not mean they are heard with any less intensity or concern. Where appropriate, the superintendent and staff will investigate your comments and report back to you and the board with an answer. We thank you for taking the time and having the concern to make our district better. Your presentation to the board should not exceed 3 minutes. And I just want to let the board know, someone had said that I was picking which public comment. I just want you all to know that when I get these emails, I read them in the order that they're given to me. No different, just however they're given to me. So, but our first speaker is Ms. Thelma Waters.
Good evening, good afternoon to the board chairman and all the board members. I'm Thelma Waters from Indiantown. And on last week, in the public comments at the village meeting, the Head Start director gave a very chilling report, very hurtful to me and to the residents of Indiantown, that we would be losing 54 families and 8 workers. I would just like to inform this board, and I know that you already know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Head Start is a comprehensive program that works and educates the families and the children, not just the children, but the parents also. As a migrant Head Start director, where we took infants from 6 weeks to 5 years, I know the importance of stimulating and encouraging children to be educated and for families to come along with them and not come behind or sit behind or they can't keep up. It's so important that we do not lose these positions, that we not lose these families that are classified by the Washington Post as essential workers. Most of our families are essential workers. They can't sit at their homes and do lawn work and work in the flower farm and pick fruit and take care of our vegetables that we consume daily. But these families are families that are hard workers, don't really know how to express themselves, but want the best for their children. I'm a former farm worker. I was born on a migrant stream. I know what farm work, how hard it is. And we just get out the car and and get in the heat for just a couple of seconds, and we can't hardly wait to get in the shade. But these people are in this extreme heat all day working for their families. When this happens, the older girls especially are kept at home to take care of the smaller kids. And in a lot of cases, these young girls are molested. We have a lot of that in Indiantown. We do not need to create problems. And I ask you, and I solicit your help and support in funding fully the Head Start program that we had and that looked like we may lose, but we're not going to lose it. I don't know what's coming up, how it's going to work, but I'm looking for an answer of being completely positive and that it's going to work. This has been such a last week and this week. These are my gallant weeks. I'm sorry about you. But anyway, last Thursday, I got the news from my oncologist on my visit that I was cancer-free. So that was a hoo-hoo for me. And this is going to be another one. Yes, praise God. I ask that you go out of your way to make this happen. Sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zone to make things possible and to create things. And we are supposed to be our brother's keeper. And if this does not go through, you will be cutting off our hands, and we can't lift each other up, and our feet where we can't stand up. I ask you, make Head Start complete in Indiantown. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know I've been, just for the knowledge of the board, I have been, and the superintendent has been, me personally communicating with Ms. Waters about what's happening, and I don't know how much the rest of the board knows, but we had to reapply for our Head Start grant, and half of the award was awarded to another organization, which essentially excludes some of our most vulnerable and best Head Start programs in Martin County, including 3 classrooms in Indiantown, 3 in Port Salerno, and 1 in East Stewart. And when they awarded this to the other organization, that organization only has that $1 million to fund Hope Sound and East Stewart. That's it. It excludes completely those 2 schools that are losing all of that funding. So we have been working with Congressman Mass' office. We got an email today that hopefully we're going to get in front of the Health and Human Services in Washington to be able to talk about this, because I got some disturbing news that the organization that was awarded the grant is they're not having a lot of success filling those spots, and if they're not filled, that they could possibly be moved to Polk County. So we would permanently lose 140 slots in our Head Start program because an organization can't fill those seats, when we know for a fact that we can fill those seats. So we're doing everything we can to not lose those here in Martin County and have them go to somewhere else.
And we have operated this program since 1993. And so for them to take an action, Ms. Corcoran and I have worked with Congressman Mass' office. We have worked with Head Start out of Atlanta, and they would not give us any information about who another agency that we were competing with. We did not know until this came out in July that we were losing this money. And so I think this has been, I'm glad that Chair Powers has brought this up again. And so whatever it is that we have to do, but we have had this program since 1993. There had been an issue back in 2015, but for the past 5 years, we have still had this program. And to say that it was something that happened in 2015 that had been remediated and corrected, it's, we don't have an answer. So I think that we should still continue to pursue this and let people know that there are children, needy children right here in our community that have depended upon that service. And to do this as a complete surprise to Martin County, it's unfair.
And they can come and take everything out of those classrooms. Well, it's unconscionable. And I think that there will become a point in time when we, as individual board members, will need to get very vocal, and along with the community. I've already reached out to the State Board of Education, Mike Olnick, our member there. We've reached out to Frank Brogan at DOE in Washington. So we're starting to have all those conversations and get people. I think the more people that start needling HHS, the better. Congress's Mass Office said today they're trying to set up a meeting with us, hopefully maybe later this week or early next week to find out. But I think the more we all too, if you feel like you want to call or get involved in it, I don't see any harm in contacting Congressman Mass' office and telling him how important this is. And I suggest, Ms. Waters, that you call him too. And, because I think they need to hear from people that know all the good things that Head Start has done for our community. So I'm gonna keep you informed.
Plus, we don't have an alternative. We don't have private daycare centers, we don't have any of that. So this is it. And if we lose this, that's out. You have to strike the iron while it's hot.
Yep.
And it's hot now, so if we lose it, we won't, I don't think we'll get it back.
I agree. So we're, believe me, I'm working hard. I'll keep you informed. Okay, our email public comment, the first one is from Richard Bird. Why is it teachers think they are in more danger than cashiers or wait staff? No work, no pay, proving need for more charter and private schools. Kathleen Brandenburg. The estimate that 50% of cases may spread by people who aren't showing symptoms is based on a model published by the National Academy of Sciences. If it's really true that 50% of the spread of this comes from asymptomatic people or pre-symptomatic people, it looks like this is an incomplete email. That was it on that one. This is from Catherine Tyler. Thank you to all the board members and administrators for the sensible outcome of the whole meeting tonight and all the long hours that went into all these meetings leading up to this big one. To all whom was present at the meeting, I want to say thank you for paving the way of handling situations with unpredictable outcomes and with pride in our county, Martin County, strong we are. Thanking you for giving direction of standards and by implementing the best judgment for our children's future, as the long-term outcome is not known. Thank you for sticking with the current school calendar for the year in education of learning, moving forward with it upon any new arrival of events as a given. So I'm reading this verbatim, so I apologize. Thank you for sticking with the current school calendar. All right, that's a repeat. Thank you for giving us a choice of going back to brick and mortar as well. Thank you. Thank you for your choice too. As the only county in Florida, Martin County is my hometown. I was born and raised. You gave us a choice as parents for our kids and for the future of Martin County. They can't go unrecognized or unappreciated in my book. You are all worth it and appreciate you all and know you give your all for our kids. Thank you. Thanks to you again, to all you brave men and women for sticking with your roots and your best judgment moving forward for what's best for our children. I wish I could go on Facebook and tell everyone on there how grateful and blessed I am to be a proud parent of the Martin County School District, but I'm not on any social media platform. I have one email and do random FaceTime sessions with family and friends. So proud of your decision. I think so proud of your decision and to stay strong for us parents that need the in-school platform approach of instruction. It has proven to be the best way overall. Children, academia, and skills shown to be true. I am a proud parent of the Martin County School District, as well as my husband. As a local business owner, we are proud parents of 2 boys that are enrolled in Martin County School District and will always be supportive of my community and schools. Thank you again for a magnificent meeting of compassion on all sides, but we did it, and you all made the right choices. Thanks to you all, and I am truly grateful. Okay, this one is from Alexandra Callawart. Dear members of the board, I know this is an incredibly difficult time for all. As a parent, however, I'm becoming angry with the back and forth on school starting. I honestly don't care if you go virtual, all in school, or combination, but for the love of all that is holy, please decide when we are going back. Why is it all other school districts simply announced a 2-week delay, but here in Martin County, not only are you delaying our decision on the delay, but we are also asking parents to make a choice on the virtual classroom option before we even know when school is starting. How do you expect parents to make that decision if they don't even know when school is starting? Additionally, many parents need to make a plan and to do this, they need to know when school will begin. Please tell us when we are going back. So. This is from Stephanie DeVoe. Delay the start of school and work with the MCEA on options to allow all to safely reopen schools. I do not want any students or teachers to die. Thank you, Stephanie DeVoe, high risk Martin County School District teacher and alumni. And this is from Miss Goyle, or M. Goyle. Goyle. Hi, I am very concerned about my child going back to school on the 19th. I would request you to follow the other counties in Florida. Please push back the reopening to the 25th. My name is Mike Einhorn, Vice President of Sales at International Molders, a local distributor of reusable and/or disposable non-surgical masks. I am reaching out as we aim to use remaining summer months to help school districts prepare. Oh, this was sent to, this is a solicitation, sorry. Obviously got sent to our public comment.
Can't hurt a guy for trying.
This is from Brandon Tarpley. I am the parent of 2 elementary students, one of whom will be starting kindergarten this year. I'm also the husband of a Martin County School District employee. I was very pleased to hear at the last board meeting it was decided to open schools back up as regularly scheduled, while offering traditional in-person and remote learning. It is my understanding that this decision might be reconsidered and we are in the 11th hour for the start of school. I respect the concerns from teachers and parents, and each person/family must make the best decision for their own situation. However, I find it alarming that I have seen many teachers on social media or in person around town at grocery stores, restaurants, shopping centers, or even gathered in crowds with their boats. But yet they have claimed they are fearful of returning to school with their students. This seems quite contradictory. I know that many school district departments have not stopped working. I know that grocery stores, home improvement stores, restaurants, banks, and all essential workers have continued working. Why should teachers be exempt? In most workplaces, if an employee decided they weren't going to return to work, no matter the reason, they can be replaced. Let's be clear. I'm not looking for a babysitter or childcare. I'm looking for my tax dollars to go towards my children's in-person education with socialization, imaginative play, activities, projects, etc. All these things contribute to their education and mental well-being. I am not oblivious when it comes to COVID-19. I work in the medical field. I have a very strong understanding of not only the virus, but the statistics. This isn't going away, and kids need to be back in school. Stick with your decision and don't fall back. To quote John Lingate, you can please some of the people all of the time. You can please all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. Thank you for your time. And that is all I have from Ms. Balls for public comment. Sorry. Okay, so, item 3.01, the Citizens Advisory Committee applicant summary document. Dr. Vogel, and are you,
Thank you, Mrs. Powers. Mr. Riker is going to cover this item.
perfect.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Powers. As you know, the Citizens Advisory Committee completed their task on the evening of July 30th, following their third gathering, and they have submitted 6 names forward to the school board for your further consideration. And we're asking today that the board simply accept those 6 names that came forward from the work of the advisory committee. As you recall on your timeline, you have a meeting scheduled for August the 17th to formally identify semifinalists, which may come from that list. It may come from individuals that the board adds to the list, or the list certainly can be adjusted based on the board's upcoming action of August 17th. But 2 things associated with the work of this advisory committee this afternoon is we're requesting that the board accept the names as submitted forward, understanding that there's further action to be taken by the board on August 17th, and also as appropriately determined by your board attorney, that following the board's acceptance of the names today, that the attorney in the appropriate fashion communicate with each member of the advisory committee to release them from the requirements under Sunshine.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Any comments? Ms. Roberts?
I'd just like to thank the Citizens Advisory Committee. I mean, of course, I've been going over the list myself, but I really appreciate their taking the list and lining it up and all the work that they've done. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, they did it. They did a really great job, and they all I've heard is really great comments. They all took it very, very seriously in looking and researching the candidates that they ranked here. So I think that seeing no other comments, or I think it's okay, we'll go ahead and release them. And we'll get that message to our school board attorney that to get that out to the members of the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. And if I could, just 2 other quick items, please.
Sure.
Now that we're preparing for the August 17th meeting to identify formally or your semifinalists, just to let you and the board members know that Ms. Messina with FSBA will be contacting each board member. As you know, the board is looking to, once they identify the semifinalists, have the semifinalists respond to 5 questions before you get to the point that you identify finalists to bring in for interviews. So Ms. Messina will be contacting each board member to solicit each board member's questions that they would like to ask once the board identifies the semifinalists, and have them to respond to that. So we just wanted to kind of give each board member a heads up that Ms. Messina would be doing that in the coming couple of days to get that question. So when the board does identify formally the semifinalists, Ms. Messina will send those questions to each of the semifinalists and ask them to respond by the established deadline. The other brief item, Madam Chair, is there's in prepping for the finalist questions, once you identify finalists and they come in for their on-site interviews, Ms. Messina has developed a bank of questions that center around the pillars that has been established there in Martin. And there are 5 general areas, and we would like to see if the board can this afternoon just identify which area each board member would like to ask questions of the semifinalists on. And those 5 areas are general and personal leadership, which we would suggest that potentially the chair ask questions in that area. And then we have 4 remaining areas: student success, employee success, the culture of collaboration, and then the financial stability area, which centers around operations. So if the chair would permit, and if at all possible, if the board could select from those, the remaining 4 board members, select one of the big areas: student success, employee success, culture of collaboration, or financial stability, to be the area that they will focus on asking the finalist questions during the on-site interviews.
Okay. Ms. Roberts?
So I have a question. So Andrea's going to call us to get questions that we're going to submit beforehand, and I'm assuming she's going to be doing
Yes,
that sometime this week, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you're saying that at the actual interview, you want us to have another question, or?
So the first set, and Andrea will go into a lot more detail, and it's kind of like, we'll send that, and they will respond in written form. And then it's kind of like a question that you want to ask that would be really important to you, that would might eliminate them from being a finalist in your mind. So whatever that main topic is that's really important to you, you might want to ask that of the semifinalists that we decide on. And then that way we can kind of start to get our list down a little bit.
So is it the same category? So for example, if our chair is working on the leadership question, she's working on the leadership question that has to do for a written response. But are you also saying that her interview question should also be in that category, or are you?
No, ma'am. The singular question from each board member will be whatever area you feel is the most important, that you would like to glean some input from each of these semifinalist candidates once you identify them. After the semifinalists respond to those questions, then the board will, at their meeting that's scheduled to identify the finalists, they will identify the finalists, and those responses to the one question from each board member will help you determine in selecting the finalists. The bank of questions would be down the road when they're broad categories that each board member will emphasize and center upon as they interview the finalists during the on-site.
Okay,
This,
so I think I
this
understand
is
all the.
Bill.
Okay,
Okay, this is Bill. The questions that Andrea is going to be calling you about, the individual questions, if you'll remember when we first started talking about this process, board members each had some particular area they wanted to make sure that whoever was applying would answer. And so this process will allow each board member to focus in on one area they think is important. Also, these questions can be answered either by video, which could be posted, or written. So when Andrea talks to you, you can say, I'd like this question answered video, or you'd like it in written form.
okay, so I guess, which I understand all that, I'm trying to move a step beyond that. So when we get those answers back, at some point before we do the interview, the board members will then have questions that they're going to be asking as a group, and then are those categorized?
So the questions that we'll be asking as a group are related to the general and personal leadership, and the 4 other pillars. So that's in the in-person interview of the finalists, and that's the one that we do all together with the finalists here in front of us. The written ones, we could, if we have 8 people that are semifinalists, and that first round that Andrea's going to call you about is really to get information to hopefully, start to move the list a little bit smaller.
Okay.
And then we as individuals, when we interview them one-on-one by ourselves, we would have our own questions, but still the same questions that you would ask every single candidate.
Correct. Okay, so I'm interested in financial stability.
Okay.
Unless somebody else wants it, I offer it to Tony, Mike, Victoria.
You can have.
No, I'm good. I would like culture of collaboration.
I'll take employees.
Mike, you got student success.
Okay.
Let me just.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you guys have anything else, or was that a wrap for you guys?
Well, Ms. Powers, the only other thing, if I could please, I did provide Ms. Falls with a slightly modified timeline. As you know, the advisory committee did have another meeting scheduled in case they needed it. They do not need that meeting now, of course. So I believe that Ms. Falls has put in your packet a revised timeline with that next meeting eliminated, and it's just been adjusted based on that work. So that's just more or less for your information and kind of gives you an overview of the events as we move forward. But I did want to adjust it since the advisory committee has now finished their work.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
perfect. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to item number 3.03, operating initiative worksheet and employee training.
Okay, so you remember that this is we had a discussion, and this was to be brought back, and you also had asked Ms. Paget to please bring back her professional development plan, because that had been one of the items. And as we looked at this as a team, we looked at this and said, well, the role for this, there was, what we thought was not a lot, and based upon your areas, and so we wanted to bring this back. She has her professional development plan, but then also to discuss your priorities for some of the things that you had already established, and if you wanted to continue them or not, and how that would play into what is left over in money. So, that's kind of where we are with this right now. So we have Ms. Paget here, and I believe she's going to share her plan that the board has asked for her to bring back.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Superintendent, Madam Chair, and members of the board. My name is Heather Paget, and I'm the coordinator of professional development. And I'm here with Dr. Perez.
Chief Human Resource Officer.
I'm sorry, Heather, I don't mean to.
Nope, you're good.
Is this is different than what was attached? So I have 4 things for this agenda item now? Is that correct?
If something was added, I have 3. Dr. Perez, did you add?
Is this the one that's being passed
Mr.
out?
Bonner's
This
staffing
is not
update. That's
your
what-
This is not us.
her plan.
Nope, that's
This is
Mr.
not it.
Bonner's staffing update. You guys wanted a staffing update at every meeting, so he's gonna present that later.
Oh, this doesn't have it, go ahead.
No.
Sorry.
You guys like, uh-oh, I don't know.
Fine, sorry.
Thank you.
I thought it had something to do with what we were doing.
It's okay. So I'm excited to share what we've been working on as far as the proposal for employee training. So one of the documents that I've provided you is an itemized budget sheet of what we are proposing that we utilize millage money for in terms of professional development. So I've listed the employee training topic, a recommended presenter, who the audience would be, a little bit more specifics in regards to the topic, what date we're considering, what the cost would be, and then what the total cost would be. So Sometimes the total cost was different, just dependent upon what the topic was and who the audience was. So this is an itemized list, but in addition to the itemized list, I also have some slides that I would like to share with you to explain this a little bit more in depth. So if that's okay. So as far as the proposal for employee training, we collect data each year in a Title II survey from our staff, and a part of the Title II survey is asking about professional development. You know, when do you like to have professional development, and what topics interest you? So this is some of the data from our Title II survey. And based on the data from the Title II survey, and also feedback that we've received throughout the year last year, these are some of our strategic areas that our staff are asking for. So as you can see, admin input received for the 2021 year included that they're requesting more professional development on closing achievement gaps, culturally responsive teaching, and creating equitable environments. So that was from our admin survey that we completed. And then, is it okay if I take this off? If I'm far enough away? Okay, sorry. Thank you. And then similarly, the most popular sessions that teachers attended at our professional development day last year, or this year in January, were all about understanding and teaching social emotional learning, being a responsive educator, and providing student-centered environments. So in addition to the Title II data, we were able to take the survey data from our January PD day, one that we sent to admin, and bring that all together. The January day, we also took attendance. So when you're seeing what was most highly attended, that was based on what they signed up for, and we actually had to open up some sessions a little bit more, or add sessions. Okay, so that was some data that we had. So part of what we're proposing to spend millage money on is continuing education for our non-instructional employees. So that is something that was already being offered in advance of this proposal. Through IRSC, we've been able to offer that to our AFSCME employees, and per them attending and completing this continuing education, they're earning certificates, specialist certificates. So I actually had one employee reach out to me who's ready to sign up for another course, and he said, please share that he has definitely taken advantage of this opportunity. He sent me his transcript. He's completed different certificates, including technical certificates, business specialist certificates, and he said he's absolutely utilizing what he's learning here with his job. So that was really a highlight. And my understanding as of right now is that we've had at least 10 of our AFSCME employees take advantage of this opportunity and earn these certificates. And personally, I think that we could share this information even more so we could have even higher numbers of employees.
So Heather, do you want us to interrupt you as you go, or you want us to wait till the end?
Sure, you can interrupt me, that's fine.
So your 1,700 per certificate or specialist, at your 51,000 is 30 certificates, and you've had 10 employees that have taken advantage of this. So are you looking for multiple certificates per employee? How are you planning on prioritizing that? What's your plan there?
So currently, the way that it's put out is kind of first come, first serve. So some, like that employee has taken advantage of getting multiple certificates, where some employees have just received one. So we could definitely analyze how we would prefer to prioritize per staff. But I anticipate that if we market this correctly, that we could have more AFSCME employees, which is why I budgeted. And the $1,700 is an approximation of how much those certificates, coursework, and then getting the certificate cost. So I just estimated based on what we already had happen and what I would like to see happen, which is an increase.
Okay, and is there a way, as you're looking at these certificates, to be sure that it aligns with what their job function is? Are you're taking care of that?
Yes.
And then that begs the question of the certified nurse assistant training.
Mm-hmm.
So
where are we at with that? So I don't have that included here because it's a separate piece, but I'm happy to talk about that. So with the certified nurse training, we have contacted IRSC and we've worked with them to get the next course, which begins in October. And Dr. Perez sent a memo to all health assistants that it is required that they attend and complete that training. So we have that money earmarked, they're able to contact IRSC, enroll in that course, and start in October. It does go through January. That's the first offering that they have, like, upcoming. It does go through January, and they're willing to take all of our health assistants in that course.
And then what's the cost of that? That's not included in this 51,000. What's the cost of that?
That's not, so the millage line on that was completely separate. I believe we have about 46,000 in that millage line, and I did
No,
not.
you have 25,000 in that millage line from year one.
From year one, and then wasn't there some that?
It did not roll over,
Oh, okay.
so I don't know how much,
So it costs about $1,300
okay.
for them to complete that course.
And how many more do you have to do it, do you know?
We have,
I want to say we have 12 or 13 approximately, but we are hearing that there are people, now that we made it mandatory, we are hearing that there are employees who do not want to do it. It is a commitment, it is a time commitment, it is an evening commitment. They're looking for online, which unfortunately IRSC is not offering. So what we're going to do in that case is, they are paras in that particular role, so finding a para position is not going to be difficult at all. So we could move them into a para role. And at this point, based on what we're seeing with COVID and all the needs that we think we need for our schools, we will be, as a para or as a health assistant tells us they're not going to do it or they resign, we will be looking to fill that role with an LPN and start filling our elementary schools with the most neediest and just fill them in as we go along. We think that it's a good time to do that because based on everything that's happening now with COVID and all of the things that could go on with schools, with having to make sure that students are healthy, staff is healthy, staff feeling well, we think it's a good opportunity for us to do that. So that's the plan right now. Anybody who wants to be a part of it, training can begin, and we have about, I think, 3 or 4 who have said yes, and we have some that are not sure, and some that they're probably not going to do it. So, and then at that point, we can move them.
So if we normally have 22 or so CNA or people in this role that we're trying to get certified, and I believe that we've done 3 or 4, is that correct?
Yes.
So which leaves the gap of like the 19.
So we're only looking right now, as far as filling the roles for LPNs, we would be looking at doing elementary only. So as people are needed at the secondary, we would take an LPN from this particular elementary school and then move them into a secondary role and rotate them that way. We have a list from our deputy superintendent and her staff that shows which elementary schools are the highest need for either a CNA or for a LPN. And so we're moving those as we get along. So like I said, as somebody either resigns or tells us they're not interested, that's an opportunity to hire an LPN, put them in the elementary schools that we were given as far as being the most neediest or the highest priority, and that's how we would do that.
And I don't mean to belabor this, but since it's been a couple years that we're doing it, I beg the board's indulgence. So you will know by September, I presume, how many have signed up to take care of this CNA designation and the training, because they'll have to be starting in October, correct?
Absolutely.
And then you'll also know how many don't have it, and you'll know how many that you're planning on replacing with LPNs.
Correct.
And so then if we're replacing those with LPNs and this training goes through January, then it's fair to say that by February, everybody will either be, unless you flunk the class, you will either be a CNA or a LPN. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's a pretty good estimation. Yeah, I would say that by then we should have either an LPN or a CNA.
If you're
in every.
Okay, and so you can let us know in September how many you have signed up
Yeah, I could
for-
probably give you an update as to right now. I have the numbers back in the office of who said no, who said yes.
Okay,
We have a
all right.
couple, so yeah.
Okay, Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry I took that long with that. Go on. I'm sorry, Heather.
No, great question. I did want to add, Ms. Roberts, though, that there's the $1,300, but they're also given a $500
Yes.
stipend, so it'd be
Yeah.
$1,800.
Yeah.
So
Right.
just want to clarify. Okay, so that's that. Okay. So in addition to the continuing education, a piece of what staff is asking for and what we know is needed is closing the achievement gap. So that's another topic of interest. So one example I included here of someone who we could bring in, her name is Caitlin Tucker. As you know, right now, we're transitioning from full brick and mortar into a different situation. So part of what teachers are going to be doing is blended learning. And Caitlin Tucker offers a workshop. She's like the guru in blended learning. She offers a workshop. It's a 3-hour workshop, a half-day workshop, and our teachers could actually participate virtually. So I've included that in here as something that all of our teachers could use. I gave the full number of our teachers. So the number that you see there would be to get all of our teachers trained with this 3-hour half-day workshop. There are other options available, but I wanted to let you know this one's probably the most feasible and the one that everyone would be able to attend. In addition to Ms. Tucker, we are also very interested in Mr. Gusky. So Thomas Gusky is a very well-known author and a researcher around standards-based grading and reform. So we're proposing to bring Mr. Gusky in for our district PD day to work with our staff. So to work with our teachers, specifically our secondary teachers, but could be with all of our teachers. And that day is in February. So we've already talked to Mr. Gusky, and he said he's happy to come in if we are available and ready to offer that to him.
And how many teachers does that involve?
That could involve all of our teachers. We were looking specifically at our secondary group to have some intensive work with Mr. Gusky, but he could do all of our teachers if we would like him to have elementary and secondary.
Okay.
Mhm.
He can do all at that 5,000 price?
Mhm.
Okay.
So up next is some work with the Jack Miller Center. So some of our teachers have already started this work with Dr. Malham, but it's a year-long series of small group webinar discussions, and it's designed specifically for teachers who teach Florida history, government, and civics. It says it's offered at no cost, but what we are proposing that we do is pay the teachers to attend the training because it's outside of work hours. They just completed some work this summer with Jack Miller Center, and right now I believe we have 15 participants that have enrolled in that opportunity.
And isn't that centering around closing the achievement gap?
Yes,
So that's 15 teachers for a total of $12,000.
yes,
Okay.
for time paid to attend. And
Did they get paid to do the summer piece?
they are getting paid to do the summer piece.
Thank you.
And that's right up your subject area there, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, it is.
That was just for you, Mr. Anderson. How did you know? Yes, and this is still all under the closing the achievement gap part. Up next, a proposal for the virtual Florida Standards Rigorous Reading Institute. So Doug Fisher is a very well-known name, and he has a lot to do with the best standards that are coming out right now in Florida. So he is offering a standards institute tomorrow that we have enrolled all of our instructional coaches in, our literacy coaches and additional instructional coaches, as well as Ms. Blount and Ms. Beard and myself, to attend this full-day training. With the training, you receive a copy of his rigorous reading book, and they have made it specifically for Florida, a Florida edition. So we will get access to his book, as well as the training that will go into tomorrow. So you can see, it's a little hard to see, but you can see that the new best standards, what it requires, and how this session is going to include attention to each of these access points, specifically using the new Florida best standards.
And how many people does that involve?
Currently, we have 21 attending. And it does represent a cross-section of all schools.
So if you're going tomorrow, how are you paying for it?
So we've committed in PD, it was only $99 a person. And so we've committed that if this is not something that we're interested in spending millage funding on, I do believe it's incredibly important for our coaches to have this learning, so we've committed to paying for that if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
We've already paid for it. Let me.
Okay.
Okay. So those are the topics for closing the achievement gap. Up next is diversity and inclusion as a topic. So we're proposing for diversity and inclusion, a piece of this would be some work with Zaretta Hammond around culturally responsive teaching and the brain. She wrote the book. I'm reading the book. But she's a well-known speaker. She's been in the classroom. She was a teacher. She's been an admin, and she says people often call her Dr. Hammond, but she doesn't have her doctorate. So She just thinks that's interesting. But we're looking at some work with Zaretta Hammond, and in addition to work with her, I'm proposing that we build a 2-day summer institute for teachers with breakout sessions. So the money here would be a stipend for teachers who attend at a rate of $100 per day. And I've only allocated for 100 teachers based on funding. So it would be 100 teachers. I don't know if it would be, if we want to make sure we have a representation from across schools, so you could have a certain number of teachers from each school site who could attend, if it's application-based. But the intention with the institute is that teachers would leave with something that they would now go back to their school and help redeliver and promote.
So that's different than the 10,000? Or that is the 10,000?
So the 10,000, so Ms. Hammond is hard to get a hold of. So I put an estimate there. Honestly, I have not spoken to her yet. I've reached out, but have not been in contact. So just based on some work with other consultants, I went on the high end. And then the 20,000 would be for district staff, for 100 teachers to attend a 2-day summer institute, and then another 20,000 for all non-instructional staff as well, because
But if you have 100 teachers times $100, that would be 10,000, and you've got 20,000 in there. So you're really saying
Oh.
200 teachers at?
because it's a 2-day.
Oh,
Because it's a 2-day.
Okay,
My apologies.
all right, thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then also all non-instructional staff. So we could, dependent upon those numbers, their contracts are a little bit different, so I'm anticipating similar, but to be determined.
And how many people is that?
I am not sure of our number of non-instructional staff, but what I've allocated here is that we could go up to 100. So that's where I put dependent upon contract and schedule, because I know some of our non-instructional actually work in the summer, so we would just have to, I'd have to play around with those numbers.
Okay, thank
That's just an estimate. Okay. All right. So in addition to that, we're proposing more work around promoting teacher leadership. So part of our promotion of teacher leadership has been our Martin Mentors program. So we had our first inaugural year of Martin Mentors this past year, which was very exciting. And we were able to train and certify almost 20 teacher leads from across the district to work with our new teachers. So they went through training. As they were going through training after school, they also worked with their mentees in the school site. And they worked with them all year. The mentees were compensated, as well as the mentors, who were compensated outside of contract time. And I just shared with you what we do for the programming comes from the state. So it starts with the work around growth mindset, and then we get into content knowledge and how we coach that with new teachers, instructional strategies, and then assessment and feedback.
So when you have 20 that are certified, you also have 20 that are new teachers? Is that the way it works, or do you have more than 20?
So more than 20 new teachers. So we don't want to exceed a 5-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
Especially if they're first year. So what we told our mentors is if they had, a lot of first year, then we wouldn't go over 3-to-1. If it were just new to the district, but with years of experience, they could go up to 5-to-1. And we allocated those mentors based on number of new hires per site. So if we had a school who didn't have any new teachers on board, that looks different as far as allocation of mentors, different than a school site who may have had 15 new teachers on board. So we had a whole system of how we said, hey, this school you can have 3 mentors participate. This school you'll have 1 mentor participate. And it was based on number of new teachers over the past 2 years.
So how does the 15,000 get broken up?
So the 15,000 is approximately what we spent this year on our mentors and mentees. It's not specific. But if you look, what we propose right now for compensation is mentors attend training last year once a month at a rate of $25 an hour. And then we asked them to work with their mentees at least an hour a week. And then if you can see our year 1 new teachers, that would be our priority group. We would want them to work with their mentors more. And then if they're like a year 2, or again, just new to the district, it would be as needed, really kind of as deemed by admin at the school site. So that's an estimate. It's not specific, but it's based on approximately how much we spent this year with our mentors, but I can break it down if you would like.
And how many certified did you have this year that you spent that much money on?
We ended up with almost 20, I believe we were at 17, who completed the whole program. As far as mentees, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look.
If you can get us that breakdown, that would be helpful. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. So that's our mentors. And I did have a couple of quotes on here because I've had people reach out, so feel free to read. But essentially, the mentees overwhelmingly just really enjoyed their work with their mentors. It was really a specific and purposeful partnership. And our mentors had different artifacts and actions that they had to take with their mentees and then bring back to us. We gave feedback, so we actually observed our mentors working with mentees, provided feedback, because the expectation was that they provided feedback. So it was a full circle. Okay, so in addition to continuation of Martin Mentors, another opportunity to promote teacher leadership is through attending conferences outside of our district. I find that it's not something that our teachers often get to attend necessarily, and sometimes they'll go out to like donors choose opportunities or different opportunities to be funded to attend these. So I felt like this was a solid way to give teachers the opportunity to attend conferences or trainings and then come back and share that knowledge with all. So what I've developed here, and I just estimated this number as well, because it really would be varied, and I envision an application process where teachers would say, ooh, this looks like a really good conference I want to attend. Hey, can you pay for me to attend this through Millage money? Then we would go through a process of, does it align with our strategic plan? Is it aligned with our goals here in Martin County School District? And then they would complete an action plan for ensuring implementation of that professional development. So them going out to receive it and coming back, there would be an expectation that they would share that knowledge with others. So this would be our way to help track that information and also really build a repository of our teacher leaders and knowledgeable teachers, because they are knowledgeable, so we can share that information with more. So this would be a way for us to ensure that fidelity piece.
So at 50,000, are you assuming 50 at 1,000? Or are you assuming 25 at 2,000? Are you assuming what's your?
Yeah, really, it's so hard to assume with this one because I can share, especially now in the world we're living in, like the one that we're attending tomorrow was $99 for Doug Fisher. Like, that's incredible that we were able to get that rate. But it's because we can attend from our computers where we're at. Then you have other opportunities once things start to shift a little bit where they may actually be able to go and attend. And that would have a higher cost because now you're looking at potentially paying for a hotel room in addition to the training that they're receiving. So it really is varied. My goal would be as many people as we can getting knowledge, but it's hard to say just because costs are so varied when it comes to that.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that with COVID right now, there's not much going on in the sense that teachers can go away to a conference. So right now, we're looking at a lot of the online stuff, which is going to give us some great rates. You know, as the year goes on, in the spring, that might change, and that might be a lot more. So we might take advantage of more of the online lower things early on. So it all depends on how that goes as well with COVID. So just keep that in mind.
So is there a priority system as to this is what we're trying to hit, or this is a school we're trying to get, or is it just that I got an employee that wants to do it? Because obviously.
So it definitely have to be priority, right? So we have to look at what are our strategic goals? Is it aligned to the strategic goals? What are we going to get for it? Right? What are the goals of going to the conference? How are you planning to share this information when you come back? Is it going to increase, close the achievement gap? So which piece is it going to help fit in the puzzle? So definitely priority, which is the intention of having an application process and filling out a plan for implementation. Because if it doesn't align with our goals as a district, then we would have to let that person know this doesn't align at this time. Thank you for applying. But unfortunately, we're not able to fund this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So in addition to promoting teacher leadership, we really want to dig into and have already started to dig into social and emotional learning. So part of our work with social and emotional learning has started with our student services department, and we as a professional development department want to support that work, we're all in. So part of this work includes EQ over IQ, so really understanding our own emotional intelligence. So January, Dr. Fleming came in and actually spoke to our leaders. She did a keynote session with our leaders all about emotional intelligence. And then she actually was our keynote for our whole teaching staff at the district-wide PD Day as well. And she was incredibly well received. Our leaders really enjoyed her session, and our teachers had nothing but really excellent things to say. So this is me proposing that we bring her back in to do some continued work with our teachers and leaders. So I have here elementary teachers because in my mind I thought, okay, if Gusky's coming in to work with secondary, then maybe Dr. Fleming could come back and work with elementary, but that's open and flexible. We don't have to hold to that necessarily. And also Dr. Fleming, I should say, I would be remiss not to say, she is very well known in the area of human resources as well. So really she can work with all staff. It's not just limited to instructional staff.
So that would be your February plan, is the social emotional training and the achievement gap part with Gusky,
Right.
correct?
That we would kind of split up our
Balance.
secondary with our,
Okay.
yes. In addition to Dr. Fleming, we've been talking to Mr. Matheny. Mr. Matheny, he owns, I guess I would say, something called SEL Launchpad. And our Student Services Department was able to see him speak, and he aligns everything with the CASEL framework, which CASEL is social and emotional learning. And as a school district, that's what we're utilizing as our social and emotional learning framework, essentially. And he has something called the anchor strategy, where he really talks to admin about how to make sure every student has an anchor at the school. And in talks with him, he has really started to dig into flipping the script for post-COVID student supports. So as we know, as our students are about to return, and even our staff, everyone's at varying levels of how they feel. So he gets into really that post-COVID support as they're returning. So renewing and reopening, what does that look like?
And so when do you propose that?
So I really wanted to bring him in whenever, but for our leaders, we were going to have him come in and talk to our leaders. We needed to push that. So he is on deck for potentially one of our principal directors meetings to come in and talk to principals and also our APs. And then additionally, we could work with him with working with staff. He oftentimes likes to go and work with a school. So it's very much tailored to that school. But he's also open to a larger audience at one time. It just depends on what we need. Bless you.
Bless you. So is there a way you can look at that and tell us what that would look like, for instance, if you just targeted middle schools?
Sure.
If you targeted the 5?
Yes. And no problem. Okay. So in addition to Mr. Matheny, he also, one of his other consultants, her name is Corey Sanchez-Smith, and she is the former director of social and emotional learning for Atlanta Public Schools. And we were fortunate enough to bring her in for our brand new teachers. So she was able to come in and talk to our teachers at NEO this past week. She talked to them about launching a new year with social and emotional learning, and she provided them a follow-up Q&A where each grade level got to have 30 minutes just with her to go in and ask her questions and have her answer. So it was fairly intimate, that kind of setting. So she did the whole group, and then she stayed on to do further Q&A with each grade level group, which was
really different there.
I know, she had short hair. She had short hair the other day when we saw her. But she had, I mean, her experience is vast. She was actually the first director of SEL for Atlanta Public Schools. So she's very knowledgeable, and all her work aligns with CASEL as well. So the proposal is that we would continue to work with Keith and Corey in different capacities together or separate. And then my last little part here are just some additional learning resources. So we have something called a Gale Professional e-Library. And for a couple of years, I've been like, oh, we really need to update this professional library. So we did at the end of this past year. with the SEL and DEI themed collection. So the social and emotional learning, and also the diversity, equity, and inclusion collection. So these are ebooks. These are available for all staff. You buy them as collections or themed packages. But what I think is important to note is that this connects beautifully with our Google Apps and our Google platform. Teachers have the opportunity to annotate books, upload pieces of the book, just share one page. So they could pull one page out and share that with a friend. So there's so much you can do with the ebooks, and they are completely accessible to all staff. So any staff member can log into our Gale Professional eLibrary, click on one of these books, and they're able to read it. And it won't save annotations. Like if I'm annotating it and I want to keep those, I can upload those to my Google Drive and I've saved them. It's not going to interrupt anyone else who opens that book. They're not going to see what I've annotated in that book. So I'm suggesting that we continue to build this professional e-library, because what's been great, I have to give a huge shout out to our teachers, is they've actually started engaging in some book clubs this summer, completely on their own around these topics specifically. So I think it's important that we continue to support their own professional resources, and this is one way where we can get a lot of professional resources in one location for staff to access.
And how'd you come up with the 35,000?
That is how much this collection, plus we bought 2 other like ASCD collections, cost. So when I was looking through the collections, if we wanted to buy like 2 to 3, that's a pretty solid round number as to an estimate of how much it would cost. If we continued to add like 2 or 3 each year, it would be about 35,000.
So that's a one-time cost to get it in, or is it an annual cost?
It's a one-time cost to get it in. So now that these are in, we own these. And if you look back at our e-library, there's still some old things in there, so it definitely needs a refresher. But we own them now for however long we want to keep them.
That's good.
So I want to thank you for listening to my presentation on the proposal for the millage funds. The only other piece that I've provided you today is just our plan. So it looks weird here, but it's supposed to be like a book. So I did print them for you as a book. But essentially, I just wanted you all to know, in addition to what we're proposing for millage, there's a lot of work happening in PD. So you can look through here and see how all of our departments really are shining in the area of professional development, and we have the opportunity to partner across departments to provide high-quality professional learning for all staff. So just wanted to highlight some of those pieces, and then on the back, highlight how we are professionally developing our leaders as well. So we have a full plan for leadership development over the next 2 to 3 years, specifically around the topics of social and emotional learning, diversity and equity, really becoming an advocate as a leader, and what that looks like. So you can see how we've paced it out over time, and we've already started that work with them, which is really exciting. So following the CASTLE framework as well. And then for our aspiring leaders in Martin County, we have our 10-month program for aspiring assistant principals and our 18-month program for our aspiring principals that you can see there as well. I did a lot of
I still had a couple other questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
So in your spreadsheet, you had Google Certified Educator Level 1 and 2 that you haven't touched on?
Sorry, I apologize, I skipped over that. Yes, so here's the great news. So at the beginning of summer, we had some funds that we wanted to provide teachers Google Certified Educator Level 1 training. So we purchased 200 vouchers. They're only $10, and those 200 flew. So our teachers, it was in the summer, but they saw the email come through that they had the opportunity to certify for Google. They definitely took advantage. I would love for this opportunity to be available to all of our teachers, well, really any staff. So I just allocated that. If we could spend $10,000, we could get all of our staff to have the opportunity to take the Google Level 1, and then also, if we can, Google Level 2. They have 2 different options, but the vouchers are only $10. They go through, Google provides them the training, so they go through the Google course. We give them the voucher code, they take the assessment, and they receive a certification. So I apologize for skipping that.
That's okay. I had a couple other things. I know that one of the priorities of the board has been some professional development as far as communication goes, effectively communicating, correct communications, timely communications, that type of thing. If you could, not here on the spot, but if you could also add that in, I think that would be helpful. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is, I know that in your, under the category for the millage piece, the first year around, it was broken up, it was $220,000 for the first year, and the first year included $95,000 for the grant writer, so you take that off. It included $25,000 for the certified nurses training, so you take that off, which left about $100,000. So that was the employee training piece that was $100,000. I know that in your, in the regular budget summary, under instructional and curriculum development services, there's 1.8 million, and instructional staff training services, there's another 1.5 million. So I think it would be appropriate to address what those are being used for. And I'm not asking you right this very minute, but I think it would be appropriate to say what those are being used for so that we can see which things, you know, because obviously the purchase of the Gale e-library didn't come from millage money before, and not that we have any supplanting issues, but I mean, I just think that we need to identify so that on an ongoing basis that we know what it is we're doing, because your total here is 257.6, which I think is fine, you know, I mean, a total is what it is, but I think it does need the communication piece added to it. I mean, me personally, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, I think that we should try to add a component for middle schools for the SEL training that's in there. And I would also realizing that we have a separate category for mental health programming in the millage money. So obviously, some of these things are looked at in two different areas. You're hitting you're checking two boxes by doing something. And it doesn't mean, I don't want to give the false impression that it means that, oh, well, you're taking money from this and giving money to you kind of thing. We're all in the same boat together, and we're all trying to make the best choices together, but I think we need to kind of look at what that all looks like. I would also appreciate it if you could take this list of things, add the piece that has to do with communication, add the piece that has to do with some SEL targeting for middle schools, and if you could break it down into like a A, B, C, like an A level being, you know, this is the bare minimum of what we should be looking at. B is kind of like the, hey, you know, really you should be adding these things, and C is kind of like, and some of these things, so I kind of look at some of these things that I'm looking at, and you might say that the Gale e-library, you know, a basic, you know, it's not all 35, the basic piece that would be in the A category may be 15,000, and there may be 20,000 in the B category, or, you know, however that kind of spreads out, so that we can kind of prioritize, because obviously there's only so many dollars in the pot, and I don't think we want to be in a position where it's like whoever gets here first is the one that gets the funding. So I mean, I think that would help us if we did that. And that's all I had.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions from the board?
But thank you, Heather. It's very,
No problem.
very
Thank you.
inclusive.
So I would just like to,
Thank you so
if you guys don't mind, I really want to publicly thank Heather for the job that she has done in PD. She has stepped into a role that we know is large. She really didn't know she was stepping into it, and she has done it with a smile every day, and has done an incredible job. So I just wanted to thank her on my behalf.
Thank you. That's
She's done a great
very
job.
nice.
And I will check, Ms. Roberts, the 25,000 that you mentioned for the trainings for the CNAs, I'm going to check those depending on how many we have. So if we end up having a lower number of people who want to get the training and it covers it, great. If we find that we're going to need more than the 25, then we'll bring back to you in September what that would look like depending on the number of people that say they want to take that training.
Well, and so here's the thing is, so I know that some of it's been used up already, all right?
Yeah, a little bit.
So
yeah.
it's kind of like, and it's not that, I mean, I like to, so let's say we have 25 and we've used 5, and there's 20 left, but if the people who are interested are only going to
Sure.
use up 10, we need to know that they're using up 10, so we
Exactly.
know that we're freeing up 10 to do something else with. But I think we'll have all those numbers back by September in order to be able to kind of move forward. And I think also, Heather, another thing back to you is, so for your February dates, so whenever this comes back to us, for your February dates, for your PD plan for February, I think we kind of need to know when your date is that you need to have that commitment
Okay,
in order to move forward, so that we're kind of, you know, 'cause so I think as you do your ABC, you need to have some kind of asterisks that say, hey, this needs a commitment by this date if you're planning on doing this, or this is, like, say, the e-library, the Gale e-library, that isn't something that you need to know by a certain date in order to do. That's something that, even though it may be in the A list,
right.
it doesn't need a commitment by a certain time, okay?
Okay, no problem.
I
Thank you.
felt that you all's presentation was exciting and very interesting. I like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
Thank you.
Okay, 3.04, the Millage Referendum Operating Initiatives. Mr. Morrison.
Good evening, board members, Madam Chair, Madam Superintendent. What you have before you this afternoon, if you could make that a little bit bigger, that'd be great. What this purports to represent is the 2019-20 operating millage collections and expenditures through June 30. What I wanted to show, well, first of all, I just want to point out that this is a draft, because I kind of followed the recipe of my predecessor and adhered to the past practices and percentages that were given and mandated by the board in terms of the categories of expenditures.
And before you go further, I want to correct that statement. So the percentages were never mandated by the board. The percentages, just so that you have that in your head. I don't want to give the only percentage that was really mandated by the board was the 77% that was for the teacher stipend piece. The rest of it, as far as the categories go and everything, is not designated. It just happened to be those, and the past practice from our former CFO was to reallocate year 2 in those categories at those same percentages, but just so that you,
Thank
sorry,
you very
didn't
much.
mean to
I appreciate your correction.
break your stride
so
there.
Make sure that
Mm-hmm.
I speak to it appropriately. So let's just look at the millage collections through June 30th. We have about, from the property taxes, about $11.8 million collected, which exceeds the budget of $11.6 million, which includes a prior year carry forward. So we actually over-collected a little bit by $167,000. Interest, the budget was set as $100,000. We actually under-collected and only collected about almost $74,000. So we have that budget as an under-collection for a net of $141,000, which we will talk about a little bit later. When you look at safety and security, the budget was set at $1.344 million. Fiscal year to date was $389,000, which leaves a remaining unspent balance of $944,000. In Category B total, mental health programs, the budget was set at $617,000. Fiscal year to date actual was $194,000, leaving a $423,000 balance. The recruiting and retaining teachers category, Category C, the budget was $17.5 million. Expenditures through June 30 was $8.9 million, which leaves a remaining balance of roughly $8.6 million to roll. That's a 77.4% category that Mrs. Roberts described.
And that's the 8.5 that we will be paying out this fall.
That is absolutely correct.
That's the number that, at some point, I guess within the next month, we're going to know exactly what that number is.
Yes. And just to point out that category, in the category C1-3, the 2019 MCA stipends, the budget was $8.8 million, but we actually paid $8.9 million. So there was a little bit of an overspend at $40,000, which essentially reduced next year's money.
Right.
Category D, professional development for teachers and staff. I'm sorry.
No, it should not reduce next year's money.
Okay, I was told.
So, no,
Okay,
that's
all right.
incorrect. So at any point in time, whatever the year's collection is, it's the 77%. If it ends out being more than the 77%, it's more than the 77%, but it doesn't affect the next year's group of teachers.
Okay,
So for example, if Marcia was a teacher in year 1, and I came in as a teacher as year 2, right? That, and let's say she represents the entire body of teachers, so she's getting 77% in year 1. Now the two of us are here in year 2. Whatever those collections are in year 2, 77% of those collections are now what is figured. We had always computed in that we kind of knew that there was the possibility that we would be over that 77% number,
okay,
but it wasn't, it should not be construed that we're going to balance it out, because that would not be fair to, say, me, who didn't teach in year 1, but came in under a stipend program that thought I was going to get the stipend,
okay.
okay?
So tangentially to that, then, we would have to use a fund balance to make that correction within, would you?
No, not
you would-
necessarily,
Okay.
because the way I compute it, you have about $3 million left over in carryover money at this point, because if I'm looking at your total remaining number, right?
Yep,
Your total remaining number is about $11 million. And I take
11.2, that's
And I
correct.
take the 8.8 out, I take the 8.5 or 8.6 out of it.
That's gonna
The part
roll,
that
yeah.
you have in there that we're thinking that's what the number is, then you've got a $3 million carryover.
That's correct.
So for example, as Heather sits there and looks at, oh, I've got some carryover in my category, it's not necessarily carryover in her category.
okay,
Because, for instance, so that money that you didn't spend in somebody's category, in my mind, went to pay, to be sure that we got the stipends paid according to the MOU that we signed,
okay,
okay?
all right.
And that's and just to go further, that's the danger of trying to do this based on percentages for the 5 categories.
Okay,
Because as you do that, as we end up in a situation, as we did with the teacher stipend piece, that teachers who come in year 2, year 3, or year 4
a lesser,
have a problem. And it's not just that you could possibly make all those stipends. The piece is that if 77%, so let's say it's $10 million, which means it's $7.7 million that's supposed to go out.
right,
Well, if we manage to make the stipends that we agreed to in the MOU at $7.2 million, it doesn't mean that we've saved $500,000. That $500,000 is money that then gets redistributed, so the entire 77% goes back out the door.
Okay.
So it's,
Well, I think that that's good information for us to have that
Yes.
flexibility.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
Because when you get down to the bottom line, the fund balance of 586,766, we took the additional collections that we had from the top, added it to the fund balance, and redistributed according to the percentages. So the actual roll, in theory, is in the column that says potential adjusted roll, based on my understanding of how this would work.
correct.
The only adjustment that we made was in the category of school safety and security. On July 7th, the board approved an action agenda item for $950,000 for PPE. So I reclassified that $992,000 to reflect that $950 included for the PPE.
Correct. And then on that subject also, there's the supposed, the 87.5%, the 75% from FEMA, and the 12.5% that comes from Director of Emergency Management, that's supposed to pay back purchases of PPE and purchases of that type of thing. I understand, it's my understanding that, and I've talked to the superintendent about this, that FEMA is kind of backtracking, and even though they said, oh, these are things we're going to pay for,
Right.
there's now a question as to whether they're actually paying for it. So even though we approved the 900 and something thousand
You've been
dollars,
looking to-
there's a possibility that some of that would be coming back.
Yes.
And I want to be sure and assure the public that as that money comes back, if we do get 87.5%, or we do get 75%, or we do get 12.5%, just say from emergency management, and FEMA tells us just forget it, but if we got 12.5% back from that, that it will come back into this
Yes.
millage money
This line item, yeah.
account, it will come back into this, and then we would redistribute from there, so that at all times we're transparent, so that we're not saying we're paying for something and then we're really not having to pay for it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So in essence, that kind of concludes my presentation regarding how the potential role was distributed based on those percentages. I now understand the concept a little bit better.
Okay,
Okay. Any questions? Okay, good. Thank you.
thank you. And I will come see you.
Yes.
I appreciate it, though.
Okay, item 3.05, Mr. Phillips. Is he here?
Yes, he is. I saw him somewhere. Oh, here he comes.
Marcia, is she still there? We haven't heard Pete.
Victoria, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, just making sure.
Thank you.
Thought I heard a snoring.
Stop it, Mike.
Just didn't want her to.
I think it was me.
Hey there, Mr. Phillips.
Madam Superintendent, Madam Chair, members of the board, I apologize for the short delay. I was recruiting help in my presentation to you this afternoon. So what we have is several policies that are proposed to take a look at today. Policy 0113 is simply the change of address to the new admin building.
That's an easy one.
I think that looks fine.
That's probably the easiest
Yeah.
one you'll have
Yeah.
ever.
Maybe not. Looks good, thanks, good work, Blake. Appreciate it. You did a good job on that.
If you wouldn't mind, would you mind if we went to 8600, which is transportation?
I especially like the way you did SE for the Southeast.
And so 8600, these proposed changes reflect the actions that the board took in the spring with respect to aligning our transportation policy with the state laws on reimbursement for transportation within 2 miles.
I had some comments on that.
Ms. Robert, go ahead.
So on page 1 of 7, lines 20 and 21, you have the line, students living more than 2 miles from their home school will be eligible for district-provided bus transportation. I think it would be helpful if we had a statute reference in there, you know, and I leave that to you as to what that would look like. You know, it's not that that's what the statute says you have to do, but that's what the statute says you get reimbursement for. You get, not necessarily reimbursement, but you get funding for. So maybe something along the line of the transportation categorical, and, you know, just some reference so that when you're looking at this, it doesn't look like it's taken out of context, that this is something that the board decided all by themselves, that this is where the limit is. I mean, I think that we need to just kind of frame it inside that.
Okay.
Along that same line, I know that we've had a discussion as a board. Now look for Garrett back there. I know that we've had a discussion as a board that has to do with a home address and the difference between a home address and the edge of common property. So for example, if you live in an apartment complex, or if you live in a condo, or you live in private property that's wide or large in size, but you live at the far end of it, but the closest end to it, to the school, is right at that 2-mile mark, 1.9 miles, but yet from my house way over here, it's 3 miles. You know, that there's a bus, correct, Garrett? The bus, supposedly the rule is that you would not, that the state is measuring it from that 1.9, and I think we have to come to an agreement as a board as to what that means. I know that we have said before that we want your physical street address, and I'm okay with doing that. I don't know what the rest of you all think, but I think we need to make that a distinction as to whether it's your home address or whether it's, because I know that's something we tend to seem to get into quite often. Garrett?
There was a situation today that came up where it was the physical walking distance was 1.93 miles to the physical address. So the board could decide whether it's going to be at the bus stop of the entrance to the community, since we don't enter all those communities. So we could decide if it's the bus stop or the physical addresses. It's hard when you're on the fringe to explain to a parent that we're not coming into the neighborhood and that kind of thing. So if we had a clear decision on where that point is, then we can go there. And it affects some people right on the.
Sure, and I think my opinion is that I don't think that the statute takes that into account. I think the statute is saying pretty much you shouldn't have to walk more than 2 miles.
Correct.
Okay, I think that's what the intent in my head of what this was you don't have to walk more than 2 miles, when the reality is if you have a closed, private, gated community, it may be 10 miles to your front gate where the bus stop is, you know? But, so I would prefer to continue to say it's from your home address. If it's 2 miles from your home address, that would be
That
what-
you're, that, I agree with that, but like you said, that you're eligible for transportation if you shouldn't have to walk more than 2 miles. But if it's a 10-mile drive inside a gate, then they're going to have to get to where the bus can,
Sure.
the closest point where the bus can
Sure.
pick them up.
Obviously, I mean, so if it's an 8-mile-in neighborhood, you know, they've
I
got
don't
to
think
get.
we have any of those.
But they've got to get themselves to the front gate. But I mean, I think our intention is that if you're more than 2 miles or less, more
If
than
your
2
home address is
if your
more than
home
2
address is more than 2 miles, you should be able to have a bus. And then as close as we can get the bus to you is what we have to do. And I think that's completely explainable and understandable to parents that, you know, well, we can't drive in your neighborhood, we can't turn around, we can't, you know, this kind of thing. This is the closest we can get to you. But I think if we're clear on our intent, that our intent is the 2 mile, which is different than what the statute is. It's different than what the rule is and what the statute is. But I think it's kind of like, it makes it clear to people that we are going beyond, right off the bat, we have gone beyond what the statute, beyond the reimbursement piece of the statute, because we recognize that we think it's a 2-mile piece.
Well, and I'm wondering if there could be, I mean, I don't know if they make any consideration or exception, because I know if they say to the neighborhood, but that the fact that it's 10 miles from the entry. So I think that, you know, I'd probably go for it and try to say it's, you know, this is obviously over 2 miles. So,
Yeah, but I think it's without a change in that, I think it's a rule. I don't think it's a law. I think that's, isn't it a rule?
I believe is a rule.
I think it's, I mean, I don't see any flavor in changing the rule. I mean, and it's kind of like, I don't really want them to get close to changing the rule, because when they were talking about changing the rule, they were going to go to 1.5 miles, which is kind of like open up your wallet,
yeah.
because we're not giving you enough money to begin with. So, hey, don't do us any favors.
Right.
You know, so it makes me kind of nervous to think that, because I think monkeying with that opens up a whole nother barrel.
So what you're
you know?
saying is if it's over 2 miles for you to get to the bus stop?
No,
from your
I'm just
home?
saying if your physical home address, so you can Google it,
Okay.
if your physical home address is more than 2 miles from your school property, and it gets a little bit, here's the tricky part is, it's not necessarily where the entrance to the school property is, not the front door. It's where you get to the school property. So on large campuses, there's a gate to get in over here. So take, for example, Murray Middle School, where you can come in the backside, or you can walk all the way around to the front. Well, obviously, if you do the Google piece, it's going to try to take you, it thinks you're driving, so it's going to take you to the front door. But in my rationale, no, it's 2 miles from you to get, when you get to the end of your driveway and you start putting your foot out in front, till the moment you put your foot onto a piece of school property. If that distance is more than 2 miles,
I think it's wherever they can enter. So if you
Yeah.
can enter the property, if you had to do a whole walk around, then that's not an entrance, or climb the fence, that's
Right.
obviously, so you have to take that into consideration.
Right.
I think where the tricky part will be is when, in those communities where you have, and we do have this circumstance where, yes, the home is more than 2 miles, but the bus stop is less.
yeah.
Where they get picked up, and that's what happens in Palm City. is that the bus stop is actually less than 2 miles, but the person's home is
Yeah,
3.5 or whatever it is.
If I may,
yeah.
there is a statute that talks about reimbursement, but it's vague. It does not go into home address versus the bus stop. It doesn't go into, the bus loading zone or the actual boundary for the campus. So
I
it's
think
pr-
there's, so I think there's I want to say it's a rule, and it's not a statute law, so you'd find it in the rule piece. And I think that's where, and probably Mark Coco is probably the one who has the most detail, because he's the one in my head that's most recently talked about that rule. But I mean, I just think that, so when we say, I just think there needs to be a reference so people know what the statute or what the rule is. But then besides that, I think we need to be very clear that that we're saying that when your home address, that our intent is that you not have to walk more than 2 miles, so.
Right.
However you fix that.
And I'll insert that both in, anywhere it talks about the 2-mile zone.
Yeah.
If I may, since we're talking about this, it may be a good idea to update the Realtors Association so that, because there's all these real estate apps on the web that show transportation and busing and school zones, that we could update the Realtors Association so that we can kind of clarify this so that the information that's published is accurate. Because we get a lot of information back from potential homeowners or people that purchased a home thinking that they were in the zone or this was going to be available, and now that this is changing, we can certainly work with them to do that.
So who would do that? Is that legal? Is that operations? Is that PIO? Is that Mary White? Who does that? Ginger? Who's gonna do that?
I'm happy to
Ginger's gonna do it.
ask the superintendent to have the PIO do that.
Okay. Good, okay. Thanks, Garrett.
Congratulations, Jennifer. Blake
Of
will
course,
help
with
you.
Mrs.
Garrett's
Powers, I have something
assistance.
else on that particular item when you get to it,
You mean on the
on
training?
8600.
Okay,
We're on
Should I
8600.
speak? Can I say it now?
sure.
Okay. On line 97 on page 3, it talks about these procedures shall include a requirement that all operators of school buses transporting students, teachers, or chaperones on field trips and activity trips instruct all passengers in the locations and proper use of school bus emergency exits prior to each trip. I just want to make sure that bus drivers are trained to do that, because my recollection is that I don't remember that being done for field trips. I know that they do the safety requirements that are necessary for those riding the bus each day, but I don't know that they were being done for field trips. I don't want to say they weren't, but I just want to make sure bus drivers know that that's expected of them. That's all. Thank you.
So I guess that would need to come from probably HR or whoever's doing the training.
Transportation and HR, whoever does the training.
Yeah, whoever does it, the mandatory training. Okay, any other questions on 8600?
Good job.
Okay, any questions on 9200?
Is that where you want to go next?
Yes, I would just like to leave the 3 conflict of interest because I'd like to, they're all very similar. I think for efficiency's sake, it might be easier to consider them at once.
I had some 9200 comments.
Okay, go ahead.
9200, so let's go first to, starting at 84 through 110, where you have categories. Instructional volunteers, resource volunteers, organizational volunteers, business education partner volunteers, mentors for student volunteers. Should we have one that says fundraising volunteers?
We could do that. Can I just add a piece to this?
Sure.
So we have a second policy that it's 8120,
Yes.
and that deals with the school volunteer program. And what I've proposed to do here is in adding those categories and adding a little bit of additional language is to delete this one, just because it's duplicative.
So you'd have to advertise, we'd have to workshop advertise and go through that to do that, but, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but I think we should add a category that says fundraising volunteers. number one.
Okay.
So in your head, if I'm a volunteer chaperone on a field trip, which one of these categories do you think I'm in?
And if I can give a little bit of background.
Uh-huh.
So the way that it's written now, as you can see, it says, the superintendent has the authority granted by the board to decide which volunteers are to do fingerprinting as part of the level 3 background check.
Correct, I was going to go back to that, but go ahead.
What Ms. Gaylord has implemented for this school year is that if any volunteer has the possibility of entering a locker room or going on an overnight field trip, then they will be level 3 background checked, which is fingerprinting. So that's been
Level 3 or level 2?
level 3 right now as it stands. So what this policy revision proposes is to eliminate that level 3 and just incorporate the fingerprinting into level 2.
So to go to that one, so in that one, should it actually call out a level 2 screening? So we're calling it volunteer 1, volunteer 2, but I know that the common terminology is a level 2 background screening, which including fingerprints.
It does include it.
Yeah, but I mean, instead of using our own language to pass a volunteer 2 criminal background screening, fingerprinting, I mean, I think we should call it what it really is, so that since that's the common denominator of what. And I also think my note on that was you needed another sentence under there that said, and I don't know where it goes, that overnight chaperones, volunteers in a locker room, et cetera, are classified as a level 2. I mean, so that you kind of know it right off the bat that. Does that make sense?
We could do that, or we could add, we could retain the piece where the superintendent has the authority to designate who will do the fingerprinting.
Okay, so let me go to your volunteer 1 for a minute. So your volunteer 1 is in line of sight at all times of a Martin County School District staff. So who do you envision that to be? Do you envision, I mean, who do you?
In the classroom, usually, or in cafeteria, maybe. They're in line of staff at all times.
So is it really, so it's not someone who's working at a snack bar at a football game?
Could be. Can be.
But if they're not in the line of sight at all times of a Martin County School District staff, are they?
No, they'd be volunteer. It can be, because at the gate, for example, I'm a staff member taking tickets, I can see them. And oftentimes, the band directors, if you're talking at, like, athletics, the band directors oftentimes have somebody in there that's an employee.
So, and think of a performance at a high school, think a musical performance, and you've got the parents that are sitting out front helping, et cetera, right? They're not in sight of a.
At sporting events too, I can tell you that there's not always a staff member in the concession stand or at the ticket taking.
And I kind of know that the intent of the level 2 background screening was that if you were not under, and for camps, the language they used for camps was you had to be under direct supervision, line of sight, and it wasn't more than so many hours. So for instance, Tony can't come and volunteer at my camp, and I can say, he's in my line of sight, he's under my direct supervision, but I don't remember what the hours were. Ginger, you might remember. But if he does more than 10 hours in a month or 10 hours in a week or something, he can't qualify, he can't skip his level 2 screening. So that's like a camp counselor piece, but I don't think we want to add language that says, because all volunteers need to be supervised by someone, so I don't think we want to add that language. But I'm just kind of trying to anticipate, if you're in line of sight at all times of Martin County School District staff, and I'm taking tickets at the front of a holiday show or a band concert, or I'm the group of parents that are sitting out there with the table full of refreshments, there is no staff out there with them. So then is the intent, if there's no staff out there with them, that the only people who can do that are the volunteer 2? that have gone through the level 2 training, so that I'm planning on going. I'm a level 2 training, but I'm trying to get Tony to come and go with me Saturday night. He hadn't had anything done, so he fills out a volunteer application, but, or he just shows up with me, you know, I mean,
What would you like to have, Ms. Roberts?
I don't know.
If I may, the board could carve out a public events exception, or you could carve out a third category of volunteers, which involves just public events, which doesn't require fingerprinting, but it must be at a public event. In other words, at a football game that you're talking about.
So I think do you think that would work? Would that?
Say that again, Blake. Let me think about
You
it.
could carve out a third category that involves just public events, so that you don't have to fingerprint those individuals that are, for example, working a ticket counter at a football game.
Or you could just add them to the volunteer ones. Volunteer applicants will work with students in a supervised manner in sight of all times of Martin County School District staff, or
not.
or at a public event that,
It's like,
you know, I mean, I don't know how you go there.
I think you contradict yourself if you say a volunteer one is all those things and then basically say, or you don't have to be any of those things to be this volunteer 1A, but it,
Isn't the coverage there is that they always have to be in the sight of somebody? Wouldn't that be?
So that's,
sufficient
so
enough?
in level 1, because they don't have a fingerprint, they should be in the line of sight of somebody at all
Right,
times.
yeah.
But the problem is that I can think of instances when we have adults on campus that are technically volunteers, I mean, and they're volunteers that are not in the line of sight of somebody, they're not being, you know, there's, so I don't know what you
Yeah, I
call
guess
it.
it doesn't leave us much of a choice, then they gotta be fingerprinted then.
And they'd have to go to level 2. So I guess I'm thinking mostly of high school events where, you know, somebody be working a ticket booth, and there's a lot of staff there, but yet.
But they're
I can know where-
inside.
Right.
They're the
So
coaches,
volunteers-
they're the people inside. the
Well,
gym.
and there's like people taking tickets, or, I mean, there are people around, but they may not be physically in the concession stand, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Featherstone?
Correct. Or in the lobby,
But
or in the
I will
lobby.
say there are times where there are parents running concession stands with students in there, because I might be playing varsity and I have to do a shift in JVs, so I'm in there with the parents who are clear volunteers, but the coach is out there coaching the game.
That's right.
Or I think of an
Exactly what
elementary school that's having an event where they have the PTA outside the cafeteria that's, you know, doing something, and there's not perhaps a staff person right there with them. So I can see your point that, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm starting to feel kind of, now they have.
So I agree with everyone in the sense that if they're not in the line of sight, the idea for level 2 was that they would have to get a level 2 background check. You have to be in sight of a staff member. So if they're not in sight of a staff member, then you have to have them have a level 2 background check. Otherwise, it's a liability, in my opinion.
Well, I think of volunteers, and so, 'cause I didn't run a high school concession stand, but I think of volunteers that are in sight as your classroom volunteers. That's really what I think of. Or somebody that maybe volunteers in the cafeteria where they're supervised by the staff in there at all times. So that's typically what I think of as a volunteer number 1.
Well, and I think the difference is if there would ever be an opportunity that you would need to be alone with a student, like one-on-one tutoring, whatever that one-on-one situation is, I think that to me is the threshold for level 2. If you're in a group of people, like in the concession stand and outside the outside the gym, there's typically people coming and going. It's not an area where it's going to be private. So I kind of think that that's maybe where we could go to lessen the.
I don't know how you define that. I think this needs more work. This is what I really think it needs.
I'm not interested in changing. I think that if we have a volunteer and if somebody wants to volunteer, then they should be a level 2. They may be at the you know, the stand, the refreshment stand at the moment, but they may go somewhere else, and if they're not background checked, then we don't know where they're, you know, and we don't know where they are or what they're doing, we might have a problem.
Could I make one?
Has this been a problem before in the past?
No.
Not, that piece isn't what I was looking at. What I was looking at was making our, and the superintendent was looking at, is making sure that our kids are just better protected when they're in situations such as locker rooms or overnight field trips.
chaperone.
Yeah.
So that, but
Well, I didn't think anybody who transported kids in any way, whether you're transporting them in your car, you're flying on a plane, or going on a bus, that they had to have a level 2 background screening. That's how it was when my kids were
Mine too.
playing sports. I had to have a level 2 if I wanted to.
Yeah, we did too.
And I know that in other cases, it's been, so let's say I don't have a level 2, but I want to go with my student, right? Here's my child, Tony's my son, I want to go with him, and I'm not a level 2. But it's kind of like, okay, but you can't be around any of these other students.
Right. You can't take any
Because
other
you
kids
can't
with
have
you.
anything to do with any of these other kids because you're just, you know, it's your private family vacation. I mean, me and son Tony, you know, I mean, so it's.
If you go, you could transport your own child, but if you're not level 2 background screened, but, I mean, I don't even, but you
Well,
can't
and I know,
transport.
and I know when the granddaughters were growing up, it was that even if they were at an event or something, the coach was very specific to not leave the parent or the unlevel 2 registered volunteer with the other students. It's not like, well, I'm gonna go check these people in, hang with these kids. It was, she viewed that parent as invisible. I mean, that parent was, for all practical purposes, was not there. You know, because if you didn't have a level 2 screening, you really didn't exist.
That's true, because if you didn't have a level 2 screening, you weren't assigned students. But if a parent came along with their child, they might join a group with a chaperone that was background checked, but they could not take any of those students on their own.
Correct. And to the point, if it was Universal Studios or SeaWorld, and I went with my son Tony, and Marcia went as a level 2 background screened volunteer chaperone, if we were together in a group, she can't leave and go leave these kids under my care. I mean, because I'm nobody. It's like leaving the kids
That's
alone.
right.
There.
It's worse than leaving the kids alone at that point.
if I may,
Mhm.
I think I could add two pieces that would, to level, volunteer level 1, that would solve, I
Okay.
think, most of these issues. If we were to add in the site at all times of Martin County School District staff or a level 2 volunteer. Level 2 volunteers, if they pass that background check, they would be eligible to work, to be hired. So if that person, if that level 2 volunteer, for example, is at the concession stand and is supervising 2 other level 1 volunteers, then that would solve that piece. Also, if you were to add again, the public venue exception, in other words, if you are going to go for a day trip to Elliott Museum and you're in public the entire time, and the time that you're not in public, you're on a school bus with a bus aide and a teacher. So you add the word.
We would never send a volunteer without a staff person on a field trip bus, I don't think, would we, Dr. Miller? With just a volunteer and the bus driver, there would always be a staff person present.
I've never seen anywhere
Yeah.
where the staff
I
members.
don't like that language because I don't want to be put in a position where I'm a level 2 screened volunteer. And now, because I've got other people who showed up who want to be a volunteer, who, I don't know them from Adam, but now all of a sudden I'm responsible for them. I don't think that's a.
Yeah, that's not right, because they're not a staff member and they're not employed by the district.
I think
So
there are
I think
students that work under the parent volunteer in the concession stand. Correct, Dr. Miller? At high school?
We do
Do
not,
students work in the concession stand?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
But in my mind, all the people working in the concession stand should have a level 2 background screen. I mean, that's the way I look at it. But I don't think that's.
I don't look at it that way. I think that this is going to discourage people from participating and volunteering. I think that in risky situations, that absolutely, when there is an opportunity for someone to do something bad, that they should absolutely be level 2 background screened. But every situation, you know, a level 2 background screen could bring something up that somebody did when they were 19 years old, and that makes them not eligible to come into our schools. I'm not really interested in that. I think this needs work.
So even if you added volunteer ones, are not allowed to be alone with a student. You know, even if you added that piece in there, so that if I'm the volunteer one, so I'm working in a concession
Yeah,
stand,
I mean, there's
but I
never
can't
just,
be alone with a student. I mean, I think that
unless
was
it's your own student, unless your own child.
But if it's your own child, you're
That
not
would be
really
your
there as a
child.
volunteer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
That would be your
Well,
child.
you
sure,
could be,
sure there is.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
worked in the concession stand plenty
Yeah.
of times with my kids. So we have Carol here, and it's already 5 o'clock. So I think we need to let her come and do her thing, so she's not,
So are we done with
Are we
Blake?
done with policies?
well, I'm like, are we gonna, we have Carol waiting, so, and
So-
she has to drive home,
Okay, so I guess Blake's gonna wait then, right?
yeah.
So that means staff and I have to stay for this? I was gonna.
I had a question about line
dismiss staff, and I was
39
going to
too,
leave
where
here.
you have the every 2 years. Because I think you have to get, I think there's something about level 2s where you have to get, if there's a lapse in service. Is that correct, Ginger? In a level 2 screening, if there's a lapse of 90 days or something, you have to get recertified or something?
Lapse of what?
Where you haven't done,
If
isn't there something?
If they're coming on as level 2, level 3 volunteers with the fingerprinting, we're doing the continuous monitoring. So just like staff,
all right.
if there's an
That's-
arrest,
It's every 5 years, though. And when you say level 3 volunteer, what does that mean?
That's going away.
Right, well, but he's
So-
calling it level 3, and it's level 2 background screening, volunteer category 2, 3, that, it's really confusing. Because people know a level 2 background screening is a screening with fingerprints. That's what everyone in the school district, if you work with children, have to have, or anywhere else.
And I think we're changing level 2, volunteer 2 to be, they need to pass a level 2 criminal background screening with fingerprints, correct?
Correct.
that's the proposal, yes.
Yes, yeah. I just think we should call it.
So what is a level 3? What
There
is
isn't,
that?
it's going
No,
away.
no level
Okay.
three.
Because that's, I keep hearing level 3, and it's, okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Roberts, you had another,
So I was just questioning the must register every 2 years. But that's okay.
What does that mean?
and I'll check with the volunteer liaison to see if that language needs to be kept. But my understanding is that that the fingerprinting will involve continuous monitoring, just as though they're staff. So if they were to be arrested for something, we would be,
I mean, I don't know, and I guess we need feedback from her. I mean, I would prefer, sorry, Carol. I would prefer that, that they register every year so that we're not inflating our number of volunteers by people that we
Right,
carried
people that
over
don't want to do it.
from year to year. You know what I mean?
And I don't, what are we checking annually?
We're not,
So-
we're just re-registering. And I don't think it needs volunteer
the-
/ chaperones. I think it just.
They're gonna have to self-report if they get arrested, because a level 2 background screening is good for 5 years. So unless we're running their DMV, I mean, maybe Raptor, when they come into the school, might pick up something, but.
But they're doing a continuous, there is a continuous piece that they're doing.
What? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know, I just know that it's a continuous monitoring.
we have I don't recall the name of the service, but it is it's a nominal amount, and they will tell us within 24 to 72 hours that there's been an arrest and what the arrest was.
Yeah.
So we're doing that annually for level 2 background screened, or any
It
person?
isn't, I don't think it's really annually. I think it's an ongoing service where we've registered people in there and they tell us if something happens with one of these people.
Yes, as soon as
It's a
somebody.
$6 annual fee for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I'm just thinking that we shouldn't be inflating the number
Right.
of volunteers.
They should
And we
sign up
be,
to volunteer every,
we should be keeping.
Okay. Thank you.
And what, conflict of interest is coming back, or what are we doing with
But
that?
a level,
finish.
let me just get this right, a level 2, but we're not making them get a level 2 background screening more than once every 5 years, like it is good for.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Correct?
it's,
Like Flash,
with
is
the
that what you're
continuous
saying?
monitoring, they would be good
Okay,
indefinitely.
and they're gonna pay for that.
That's what it says on line
Yes,
62 and 63.
at the volunteer's expense.
We have had some school personnel that wanted to look for other sources rather than having them pay for it, but we didn't propose any change to that.
And what is the cost of that?
It's approximately $50.
I thought it was more than that.
I think it's around $81.
85, 81 to 85
I'll have that exact
per,
figure.
per volunteer.
Do you want this one to come back? Is that what it is, though?
I think it needs to be workshopped again, yeah.
So we'll bring this one back.
What are we doing with conflict of interest? Sorry, Carol.
She said she's, okay.
We're okay.
Finish up the policies, I'll wait.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
Keep staff hanging around.
Conflict of interest.
I will be very brief. So the proposal on conflict of interest, there are 3 different policies, and those address the different employment positions within the district. The proposal is simply to delete, employees may neither solicit nor accept gratuities, favors, or anything of monetary value from contractors or parties to subcontracts. So what that prevents now, for example, is if we have a contract with Avid and a teacher goes to a conference in Orlando and and Avid is giving out, a bag of, pens and paper. If that teacher were to take that bag, it would potentially be a violation of this board policy. And if the board would indulge me, Dr. Miller has some better scenarios that she could outline.
Well, I have some worse scenarios that it should cover. And I get those little things like that, a gift bag when you go to a conference or whatever. But there are circumstances that we need this still in place. So that's all I'll say about that, because I don't think that should be removed.
Well,
So is there a way that you can qualify it so that that's,
so that somebody can take a bag that you go to a
So-
conference
so
and
is
they're
it a-
giving you a book
is it a
or
dollar amount that's the issue, or is it a circumstance issue?
Yeah,
And if it's an individual issue, then I think that we need to address that in a situation that,
I have never heard of anybody getting an ethics complaint or any pursued for getting a gift bag of pens and paper clips
Coffee cup.
in a bag. Never.
So can we just change that to say of less than
$50, that would be perfect.
$50?
And if I may, Ms. Powers, the standard of ethics for teachers is $50, and so that's why a teacher wouldn't get in trouble for that scenario. But as it's written here, for example, if you were to have a financial advisor who we have a contract with go to a school and do a presentation for the teachers and bring orange juice and Danishes, that would technically be a violation of this policy. And so, we just don't want, teachers and other staff in violation of policies. That Danish is not going to make,
I also think you need to, so I would be good with adding the less than $50, but I also think you need to add something so that there's a manner in which an unsolicited prize or something that you get that's unsolicited with no intent of doing any favor to someone, that you need to report it. So that if I go to Avid and I'm in a drawing and they give me an iPad or something that's obviously worth more than $50, do I then have to say I can't accept this because I've got a policy that says I don't? I would prefer that they can accept it, but they have to let somebody know that they, you know what I mean?
There have to be a disclosure. I think there's somewhere I remember in the rules that said that if you did accept a gift, you had to disclose it.
We
well, that's
do.
for
We
school
do,
board
yeah,
members.
well,
we
it
do.
should
But
be.
I mean, I
should be
think
no
that
different.
that's a way, you know, if you get some language, so if it's less than $50, yeah, I'm okay with you getting, you know, a sandwich or a Danish or a pen or a mug or something else. But if you win something, or if you get something that, if a
Plain-
contractor or party to contractor gives you something of value that's more than $50, that's unsolicited, with no intent of any quid pro quo coming out of it, that it needs to be reported to your supervisor. So that it then, you know, and I would think that then there needs to be some way that it comes back to legal to say, oh, no, clearly you can't do this, you know, or that's okay and it's been signed off on, you know?
I like that, I can make that change.
Does that work for you guys?
We need
Yeah,
to
well-
address that issue.
Yeah, I would like
Do
to
we
see
need
the
to
language.
address the issue of, you know, if a teacher of the year gets a car for 1 year? It's a gift of value. We need to address it. I'm not saying we need to outlaw it, we need to address it.
Well, that's what they would do in that case.
So they
In
would
that case,
disclose
they
it,
would have
they'd have to report it.
they would have to report it, that it's no intent to, you know, there's nothing intended in return for it.
But they're not a government contractor or party to a subcontract.
Right.
So that might be okay. I just don't want to create a problem.
The actual contract language, let me give you another very quick scenario, because I know we want to move on. Let's say that we have a teacher at South Fork that gets something from a contractor that has a contract with Bessie Creek. You know, a teacher at South Fork is not going to know what contracts Bessie Creek has. And there's no knowing component of this. This is a strict liability. You did it, you violated the policy. So there's no knowing component to this. And I did take a look at, for example, Indian Rivers has a knew or should have known that they were a contractor clause in there. So,
And I think under disclosing it, you would be able to keep track of that and be able to.
Does Neola have any update to this other than what you're proposing to revise in 2020? Because last revision was 2016, the effective date was '05. Maybe Neola has some language that addresses those things.
we routinely pull those, but I will pull it again just to make sure.
I think unless the statute changes, they're not going to give you a different piece.
Well, maybe we need to, you know, refer to the statute.
No, but if there isn't one, then it's not going
Right.
to trigger anything, but I'm okay with those. So the less
Those are
than
coming back.
$50.
Those
We'll
new
come back
language.
with those changes for the instructional, and then the other piece, Mr. Phillips?
I think we covered them all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The three were all very similar with the exact same suggested changes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right, Carol, you're up.
You know, like, wait 5 minutes and I'll practice that.
Can we, so while you're getting ready, so we'll let staff go, whoever needs to go, and then. Tony, can you sign this? You'll sign these.
Yeah.
Oh, and you should
You want
note
the
that
building up?
we got this,
Yes, I saw
that
that.
we've asked. Did you get one of these to post in your,
Yeah.
Diane? I can't see you because I don't have my glasses on.
What is it?
It's a staffing update from Maurice. I thought it was part of Heather's presentation.
No, I did not.
Here, here's
Yes,
this
I do
back.
have one, yes.
She's got one, Lee.
I have one now.
I was kind of confused.
Martha has a bunch.
Sure, I can give her mine. She
Was
can-
that emailed? Because I don't think I have that.
No, we just got it,
just got it.
at the beginning of the meeting, so I'll send it to you, Mrs. Duffenthaler.
Happy
Thank
birthday,
you.
Mrs. Gaylord.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Thank
happy
you.
birthday.
Enjoy your
Is it your
birthday.
birthday
Happy birthday to
today?
Miss Gaylord.
Thank you.
And happy
Thank you
birthday
for
to
allowing
Marcia
us to-
from
Oh,
yesterday.
yeah. That'd be horrible to have to sit here.
I know, maybe she can get out of here in time to actually go to dinner.
Right,
Thank you.
Wow, geez, we'll put art
yeah,
on it.
enjoy.
Thank you.
We have on Tuesday? Do we have a?
What was that?
Tuesday?
No, no.
Oh, well.
This this is new stuff you gave us, right? This one?
Yes.
Okay, and these are old.
All right. We can still go on
Sure.
while they're leaving. So, Madam Chair and school board members, I am thrilled to be here to have the initial conversation about superintendent evaluation. This is going to be a quick PowerPoint. There are some things that are going to be given to Diane, who will then get those to you, and we'll talk about those as we go on. So, we're really going to talk about what is the purpose of an evaluation. But before we go there, I want to review kind of what our governance role is. And it really boils down to 3 questions. You ask yourself, what is supposed to happen? The other one is, how is it going to happen? And the third question is, did it happen? Okay, the first one is governance. What's supposed to happen? What are you expecting of a superintendent? What are you expecting, as the conversation you just had in policy, what are you expecting in policy? And so that is the governance role, that is part of the board. The next one is, how is it supposed to happen? That's management, that's the superintendent's job, and the superintendent then works with staff, designates the proper people to make sure that whatever you wanted is going to happen. And then you come back to, did it happen? Yes, that's governance again. The did it happen part is where the evaluation comes in. Okay? So, overall, there's an interview that Dr. Book was a superintendent of schools. And there was a consultant that received a phone call and said, I really think we're going to have to fire our superintendent. We had high hopes, but I think we're going to have to fire him. Can you come in and see if there's any way we can save this? So the consultant arrived and he started talking to the superintendent and said, you know, what are the things that the school board expects of you? And how do you think you're doing? So he talked about the things that the board expected and said, I think we're doing pretty well. There's some areas that we're working on, but overall, we're doing pretty well. The consultant then went and talked to the board members. No, before he did that, he handed the list to Dr. Book and said, is this what I captured correctly? And he said, absolutely. So then he went to the board members and said, what are your expectations of the superintendent? What do you think needs to happen? So they gave him a list, and it didn't match. So the consultant took it back and said, you want to see what the board members are expecting of you and kind of how they're thinking things are going? And he said, yes, I'd love to. He opened it up, he looked at it, and to his amazement, he said, I had no idea this is what they expected. So he said, I'll take this, and we'll just look at it. About 3 months later, or a few months later, the chairman called back and said, I don't know what you did or how it happened, but there has been a change in Dr. Book. And I think whatever you did, you need to let other school districts know so that you can save them as well. Well, the reality is, the expectations of the board were very different than what the superintendent thought the expectations were. And too often, that's what happens. Another problem that sometimes happens is whatever the crisis du jour is what ends up being on the superintendent's evaluation, which has nothing to do with your strategic plan or the things that you want to move forward. So we have to be very, very careful in designing an evaluation that looks at what you, as a board, are expecting of a superintendent and where you want the school district to go. So why do you evaluate it? Because you want to define what the expectations are. You want to prioritize the goals. You have a strategic plan, and not only does it have some overarching goals, there are going to be other minor goals underneath, some of which are more important to what you are moving forward than some of the others. Some of them may pertain more to student achievement as opposed to employee discipline. And maybe student achievement is going to be the thing that you want to do. So you prioritize and identify which ones are going to be there for you. It also allows for professional growth on the part of the superintendent. We talk about professional growth as board members. We talk about professional growth as staff, as teachers. But superintendents have to have professional growth, or they become stagnant, and so does your district. And then it enhances the planning process, and it allows you to review the overall effectiveness. Are you going where you want to go? And is it happening in a way that needs to happen? So it also enhances communication between you and aligns the things that you're doing. There is a call for, on a national policy for evaluating superintendents and the accountability in the community as well. And a lot of this is on your PowerPoint, so I'm going through it very, very quickly. You stop me and slow me down if you need to. So we set the example of, and we're not going to do these activities. These are things that we would talk about if, as you're actually getting into it. But what, just kind of if you would share, just some initial reaction to what beliefs does this leadership team have regarding a superintendent's evaluation? Have you thought about it? Have you thought about where you might want to go, or what this evaluation would look like or be?
Well, I'd be looking at effective management. I'd be looking at overall scholastic achievements. I'd be looking at overall morale in the organization, leadership, those type of things, just to start.
Right,
with the
okay.
team.
Anybody else have any ideas about what they would think?
So I think I come from a different perspective, because I agree with Mike that all those things are important, but I think if we don't say, as a board, these are your top 5 priorities, these are the things that we're expecting movement on. We obviously expect you to communicate, we expect you to be a professional. So there's some groundwork of this is what our expectation is, but then this is where we expect you to be moving towards. So that if you had, let's say it's 5 things, go back to the ABC thing, here's the 5 things, and if you get those really cracking, here's 5 more, and here's 5 more, that it's not, it's unfair to be pulling something off the C list when we've said, we want you to tackle these 5 problems. And I think your point is very appropriate, that it's the crisis of the day, that when the crisis becomes, whatever the crisis is, whatever that piece is, it can be instructional materials adoption, and as that one becomes the crisis of the day, even though that wasn't one of the 5 things we asked you to address, the tendency, I think, is then to look back, why aren't you taking care of this?
Exactly.
And I think that's a...
Any other thoughts?
Well, in regards to the question, I think one of the things I'll be looking at is, of course, we're gonna have our own set of things, but just for starters, is to look at his past record or her past record, and to see that they have demonstrated some things that's exceptional, and their record should bear that out. I've always been told that the best way to probably measure what someone's gonna do in the future is what they've done in the past. So I think that should be pretty telling when you look at their resume, and some things should just jump out at us.
I agree. And part of that, though, is going to be in the hiring process, that you're looking at past successes.
Right.
As to where you're coming, but I agree.
I also feel kind of like, since this is our first time at the dance, that if we say, oh, we're going to give you a 6-month review, we're going to give you, I really almost feel like we need to be having, as a board, with the new superintendent, kind of an ongoing dialogue, especially with the first startup
get to
thing.
that, yeah,
So let's say whether that's monthly, no matter what it is, so it's a kind of, so that we can all be sure that we're on the same page, and that we're not, that it's, whether it's managing expectations or whatever it is, I mean, so that it's not that, well, we gave you 6 months, why didn't you fix that? And we're just kind of.
Yeah. And I think you'll see later on in the presentation that an evaluation is a constant activity, whether it's a brand-new superintendent or whether it's been somebody that you've had for 10 years. It's a constant process that goes on. The reason why I ask this question is oftentimes people have different expectations, such as, if this superintendent isn't doing what we want, then we need to go find another one. Versus, This is a conversation that we need to have as to how can we be the most effective board and superintendent leadership team? How can we get the most out of our superintendent and all be moving in the same direction? Those are two very different extremes. One is a, how are we going to get this done? The other is a gotcha. That's why people fear evaluation sometimes, because this is their time for them to tell me everything I've done wrong. But that's really not what the evaluation process is all about. So how do we manifest the beliefs about evaluation during the process, and how can we ensure that the beliefs are evident? And rather than spending a whole lot of time, I'm going to kind of give you the answer. You identify what's important, what's going to be measured, and make sure then that it's measured. To randomly pick things out of the air is not fair to you, it's not fair to them, and there's no accountability to the community as well. But if you have aligned it with your strategic plan, along with the budget, because we always talk about how the strategic plan and the budget have to be in alignment, if the evaluation is also in alignment with that, then you are measuring the things that you have prioritized. If it's not on the strategic plan, I would assume it's not a top priority in the district.
Right.
Is that a fair assumption?
Very.
Okay, so you would want to evaluate the superintendent on the things that are the most important in the district. Now, having said that, that's the alignment piece between the strategic plan, the budget, and then the evaluation. Having said all of that, you're really not going to pick up every single piece of the strategic direction. You're going to highlight, the most important. There are also some things that you need to take into consideration. It's policy, the procedures, policy, and the product. Do you have a policy in place? You just talked about policies. Do you have a policy in place that talks about a superintendent evaluation? This is something that you will need to examine, something that you'll need to do, and have in policy. Then you decide what the procedures are going to be. How are you going to go about doing it? How, for example, some will say that they'll sit down with the superintendent and have a conversation first, and then fill out the instrument and then turn it in. Others are given the instrument, they kind of do an initial evaluation of it, go in and have a conversation, and then finalize it and turn it in. Others will have the instrument, fill it out, turn it in, it gets compiled, and it goes on. So you'll have to talk about what are your procedures going to be, what are your expectations, how do you want to move it? And then, what's the product going to look like? What does your evaluation look like? There are some that are very, very complicated. My nose is cold, I'm sorry, I'm not wiping my nose, I'm just trying to keep it warm. There are some where there's a matrix, and then there are certain, and it's very, very involved. There are also some that will give you a scale of maybe 1 to 5 in each category. I would suggest that in the beginning, you do a fairly simplified evaluation form. It can grow into something if you need it to. You also may find that this simplified form is one that the board members actually complete, and so it's more beneficial. There are some that are so complicated that some of the board members don't fill it out. Then it becomes kind of a useless activity if the whole board is not looking at it together.
So, and speaking to that, Carol, so I've heard before that when you give people a scale, that it's better to not do 1 to 5, it's better to do 1, 2, 3, 4, so that if somebody isn't excelling at something, so you don't get a 4, I've got to decide which side of that median line you're on. I don't get to pick. There is no just average. There's one that needs a whole lot of improvement, there's one that's excelling, but then the one that's in the middle isn't an average. You've got to pick either above or below the line. So is that?
Yeah, that is often suggested. There's another thing that if you do have a scale of 5, it is easy for everybody to just go 3, 3, 3, 3 if they want to. But if they give a 1 or a 2, they have to give an explanation, examples, and whatever. And that could be with either. With a 4, what I found in some cases is people will start making up their own scale, and they'll give you a 2 plus,
Yeah.
And so It really just kind of depends on where you want to go. Part of the conversation that needs to happen is what is excellent? What is minimum? There are people that believe if you are doing what is expected of you, and I'll use a 1 to 5 scale for this one. If you are doing what's expected of you, you will get a 3 in every area. And I expect high performance, so you will get a 3 in every area. You have to wow me tremendously to get a 4, and you have to be totally off the chart to get a 5. Then the next person will come in and say, here are the expectations. If you have met those, you are meeting my expectations, which might be a 4. Now, you've exceeded it, that's a 5. So you have to talk about what the standard is going to be and what the scale is going to be, as much as you do what numbers are you going to use. Okay?
And I've also seen where people have said you could not, so here's the 10 things that we're rating on.
Mhm.
And you cannot rate someone at the top end for every single one of these. You have to pick, I mean, at least one of them has to be not, the one that you could see some improvement, that there's some way. So even though, because there is nobody who's the perfect person out
Right.
there. So instead of just saying, even you, Mike. So instead of saying that, hey, this person makes me completely happy.
Yeah.
And just going down the checklist, you almost have to pick.
Well, again, that is part of the discussion that you go into, is how are you going to do the ratings? For example, somebody could get a 5 in every area because they have accomplished all of
Right.
those priorities. And to say, oh, now I got to pick something, okay, well, I'll just lower him in communication because
Yeah,
I read something in the newspaper first,
yeah.
is not always fair. The growth can be, yes, you were right on target with this, you actually exceeded my expectations in some of these areas. Now it's time to pick up another set. So if somebody could, year after year after year, get all 5s, but they're continuing to grow because you're stretching.
Right.
If we're looking at closing an achievement gap, you may want I don't know, pick a number, a 5% gain, and they get a 6% gain. Okay, you might give them a 5 on that, but the next year you may say, you know what, we want a 7% gain, and stretch them that way as well. So, and there is no right or wrong way to do it. There is no right or wrong way with the right number of things. So it's just an agreement that you come to, but it's an agreement you come to with the superintendent. It's not something that y'all just create and hand to them. Sometimes there'll be some things that may be in the contract that have to be included in there as well. And there may just be some things that, that you all want, but the superintendent needs to understand what your expectation is in regard to that.
Well, and I think there's a difference between the evaluation instrument and goal setting too. For like a
absolutely.
year, you have certain goals that you want to accomplish over the year, so that you're not creating a new instrument every year, but you are goal setting every year as a board and along with the superintendent to, okay, so we're gonna evaluate you in addition to what your instrument says, which are the very broad categories. You're now very
You're looking
specific
at-
on your goals every year.
So you're kind of looking at specific goals within that framework. So you've
Right.
got a framework of 5 things, and what's your specific goal or goals in each of those 5 things, and what's the measurement of each of those goals?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there, you'll see that I'm leaving about 4 different school district evaluations as samples for you to just kind of look at and decide what you want to do. And you may want to even say, I like this off of this one, this off of this one, and these off of this, when you actually come together to do it. But one of the things that I really, 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 really push is you have your strategic direction, you have some overarching goals, and then how the superintendent is going to implement that will be 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. Now, which ones of these 4 point whatever? I think 4.1 is extremely important, 4.7 is really important. So you let them know, these are the ones we're really going to focus on. And when you're discussing what the measurement is for your strategic plan, you're going to know, what do you go look for? and to determine what happens with this data. You also might want to make sure that you're looking at data that will be coming in a reasonable amount of time. If you're using school grades, for example, right now is not a real good time to be using it because they're probably not going to have them. And also, if you're using some of the things, let's say you're using graduation rates as one of the indicators, but you're doing your evaluation in May, or you're even doing it in June, you're not going to have the graduation rates. So align the data with the tool as well. Okay? Remember that it is public record, and how you determine to move forward with that is important. There are school districts that publicly will bring the evaluation forward and have a conversation at a workshop about it. Some will have a conversation, and then if there are areas of improvement, the superintendent has to come back with an improvement plan, and the improvement plan is what is discussed, not necessarily all the other areas. So you look at it, but whatever you write and whatever is consolidated and whatever is put together, all of that is public record. Okay? Those are just, just saying that evaluations are necessary. The common flaws, which we've already talked about, people don't have a policy, and they don't align it with the job description. You have a job description for your superintendent, even in the advertisements that you sent out. You're talking about what you're looking for in a superintendent. Well, that's part of his job description or part of her job description. And so you might want to look at what things are important in that. You're going to have a lot, I believe, with student achievement and personnel, and there may be some diversity goals and things like that in there, but you're also probably going to expect them to be a good communicator. You're going to be able probably to expect them to have a relationship with the community and businesses and organizations. Those may be additional pieces that you add in there. So it doesn't, every single one of them have to be a measurable goal from your strategic plan, but you are going to want to make sure. And one of the biggest mistake people make is they don't align it with student achievement. And why are we here? It's not enough to be a nice person. Okay? We're going to skip past this. Again, I mentioned it in the contract. As you're writing a contract, look at, are there things in here that need to be measured? Are there things that should be evaluated on a regular basis? And make note of that so that you include that into your into your document that you're going to do. When you're thinking about the things that you want to add or what your expectation is and the conversations that you have with either potential candidates for superintendent or the superintendent itself, find out what their understanding is of your district vision and mission. Because the way it was written and what the expectation of the district is may be different than the superintendent. The superintendent may have a totally different perspective, and again, sort of like Dr. Book, they're off doing something. Or they may say, here it is, and I see this being the next step. And you may even see some growth expected on the part of the superintendent moving things forward. And that's a good conversation to understand, where is the board coming from, where is the superintendent coming from. Okay, so here are some questions to consider. What are the goals in your strategic structure? How are they measured? How are they determined? And how are you going to determine success? And what changes do you want to see in the next year? Those are some very, very basic questions. And if you get those answered appropriately, you're in pretty good shape with an evaluation. What's the superintendent's role and in the management portion? And then what are the expectations of the superintendent in the leadership role? The superintendent has two roles. And that gets into the community, the morale in the district, and that type of thing, versus the management part of getting things done. Does he put the right people in place to get those goals accomplished and everything? And then how are you going to measure the progress, the timeline, and what data? And the timeline is really difficult because so much of our data lags behind. And it's so hard to evaluate somebody on data that's a year old. But if that's all you have, that's what you use. Mhm. In this process, when you're talking about data and you're setting goals and measurements with that, think about what your, how you set those percentages, let's say. And there needs to be a lot of conversation. If you want to see a 3% gain in a particular area, and you know a 3% gain is very likely, but people are going to have to work to get you there. Do you set the 3%, and when the superintendent makes that 3%, yay, they get a 5, they get a 4, whatever, they get the top score? Or do you set stretch goals? You know, with some work, we can get to a 3, but let's see if we can get to a 5. And so the superintendent only gets to a 4. Do you then mark them down? Or do they still get that high grade because you knew in the conversation 3 was pushing it and he exceeded what we thought, that stretch goal? Have conversations about that and have a very clear understanding as to how you're going to move forward, because setting those goals in the strategic direction is important, not only for their evaluation, but for the district. And, you know, if you push them a little harder, oftentimes you get that little extra, you know, and more times than not, if you set it at 5 instead of 3, you'll get the 5. Okay? So, when do you report, when do you want to report on the progress? Now, the reason why these are up here is kind of to Lee's point, that you don't wait for a full year. You don't wait for 6 months. You have some conversation about what's going on, and at least quarterly, bring pieces of where you're going and how you're doing it. And what is your expectation? Do you want a written report that's going to be 18 pages long, or do you want to have conversation? Do you want an outline? Do you want some examples of what's going on? How do you want them to report it to you? You know, I don't want a novel, here, read it, and understand. I don't mind getting the data, but I want to have the conversation with them as well. Did this, how come this did, whoa, look at this is wonderful, what's the next step with that? Those conversations are very, very important, and that is part of the ongoing evaluation. And the conversation that goes on, that communication between the board and the superintendent is vital, vital. And so what process are you going to use is important to get those questions answered. You know, so it's more than just developing that tool. It's what are you going to do with that tool? Okay? Most in questions, why not decide together what's important in the organization? You know, I'm not going to read this to you. You're capable and you have the PowerPoint to go with it. But these are questions that are very important. And if you're evaluating staff, why would you not evaluate the superintendent? And why would you not occasionally even evaluate the work that you're doing and your performance? Okay? So what do you evaluate? You evaluate facts. What happened, where's the data, and what's the evidence? You decide as a group who's going to decide on what the evidence is and who's going to provide the evidence, and then what documents are you going to be looking at. There is so much data and so much information that every single one of you could come up with different data, different understandings, different criteria for any topic at all that you put on your evaluation. So identify what that's going to be, and that goes back to also, you know, what kind of data. Okay? So the impact of an evaluation is, what are the facts? You know, what was the result of the facts? That gives very, very specific input. Then, what's the opinion that goes along with that data? And that may go back to the example that I gave of stretch goals. They made 4%, the goal was 5%. So what's your opinion on the fact that only 4% was made? And then what can be substantiated in a report. I give an opinion of, as I gave the example before, if someone gives a 2, which means they're not, they're performing a little bit below average, why did I give that? And what, not just because I'm having a bad day and I had a conversation with the superintendent and he or she didn't give me the answer I want. That's not enough. Here's your opinion, why were you giving this, and how do you substantiate it with examples? And then, what is the context in which things are moving forward, the circumstances that affect the outcome? Again, if you're evaluating, you wanted all your schools to be A and B schools, and now you're going to look, you're not going to have that data for this year. So there are circumstances around those outcomes, and you have to take that into consideration as well. Okay, so ratings, do you do it as a group average? Do you do each individual score? Or do you look at it as, here's the whole group of scores, and it's just what it is. It's not averaged out as to what the total scores would be. Again, these decisions need to be made ahead of time. And then the directives are, what are the next steps? And board members can make suggestions as to where we might go from here. Those next steps and those directives may come out of a discussion for the next strategic plan. What are the additional goals that we're going to have next year for the strategic plan? Or they can come from the superintendent themselves. And then, again, have the discussion about it so that everybody's hearing it, everybody's input is also heard, and then you know where you're moving forward. The instruments and the cycles. There are several different kinds of evaluations, and I'm just going to touch on them a little bit. There's a formative, summative, 360, and a self-evaluation. Many instruments actually include a little bit of all of it. A 360, for example, is one. Well, let's see if they're in here. No. Yeah. A formative is you have your goals, your SMART goals, and those are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant. You know, we know those. And so you look at just strictly the goals. Did they make the goals? What's the growth of leadership? Blah, 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 and you go through. The summative is the superintendent getting the job done? On the day-to-day management in the district, does it look like things are moving along? Are you hearing good things? Are you seeing good things? Are they bringing information, even the presentations that are done? Are those keeping everybody on track? Is that happening? That's kind of the summative, and you're looking at it. And is the district as a whole moving toward the strategic plan? There's a 360, which means you as a board have input, staff has input, the community has input, anybody with which the superintendent comes in contact with has the opportunity to give information and give input, I'll say, in the evaluation process. I don't suggest, there are a lot of people that want to do it, I don't suggest that happens with a brand-new superintendent. Especially in a case where one superintendent has just been asked to leave and another one has been hired. Because everybody who didn't want this one to leave, whether it was by their choice or yours, they're not going to want to have anything to do here until you really, really prove it. So, and it'll go back and forth. These people who didn't want this to happen aren't going to give this superintendent a good evaluation in those cases, and vice versa. Those that are glad with the decision are going to be overwhelmingly excited about the superintendent. With a brand new superintendent, especially when you've never had a superintendent that has been hired and appointed before, there's some education that needs to go into the community as to what the expectations are of the superintendent. They've seen what elected superintendents have had. Is that what you are still expecting, and is that what you still want? You know?
Well, I can see it's almost a managing expectations piece, where whatever the problem of the day is, depending on the timing of the the evaluation itself, if you time it incorrectly or correctly, depending on how you look at it, but depending on the timing, if there's an issue that's hot in the community that has divided the community right down the line, you're going to have a whole bunch of people who think one thing and a whole bunch of people who think something else, and then it almost becomes a popularity contest rather than a goal measurement piece.
Exactly. Look where we are right now. When we're looking at how we're going to start school, when we're going to start school, whether kids are going to wear masks in school, whether they're going to be online, think about if you were doing an evaluation right now and asking for a 360. When you're talking about, is it a divided issue? Absolutely, it's a divided issue. And that will be reflected in the 360. So the timing of it is very important. In September, it may be different than what it is right now. Could be better, hopefully, could be worse. You just don't know. So timing is very good, but
Well, and I think also when you do that, whatever the issue of the day then ends up dominating whatever your end product looks like. It ends up dominating your product because that's the input that you got. So you
Right.
can't pretty much ignore the.
Exactly. And to do little pieces of this, when you get a little further into evaluations, to do little pieces of this, to get student input, to get staff input, to get teacher input, is not a bad thing. But look at keeping it in context as well.
So maybe that has some value as we do school climate surveys, as we do the school climate surveys and we're surveying parents and we're surveying students and we're surveying teachers, so that's the climate thing for I'm involved with whatever school, Stewart Middle School, on whichever level that I get to answer those questions. Maybe in this new way of having a superintendent, maybe that's something that we should be adding to our climate survey that has more of an overall for the district kind of piece. So at least we get that feedback. And then I think it's a more appropriately placed feedback. So at the same time that you're talking about how well does this school communicate with you, do they enforce the policies, that type of thing. I could see that if you added something to the climate survey that had to do with the district as a whole, the superintendent, et cetera, that we can get information without it becoming part of the piece.
Right.
Do you guys think?
And that's a good way to do it, because it is and you can pull those questions out. In the beginning, one of the questions may be as simple as, have you had the opportunity to meet the superintendent?
Right.
That gives you an idea as the superintendent into schools.
Right.
Is he having conversation? Is she having
Right.
conversation with staff? And
Do you know the
and-
superintendent's name?
Yeah. Ask them sometimes if they know the board members' names.
Yeah, right, same
You're going to
thing.
find out. It's very humbling. So, so think about where and how you're using these pieces. And again, this is not a punitive issue. So things that the questions, the items, the things that you're going to be moving forward are really designed to help answer the question, how can we be better? How are we doing, and how can we be better? And if you're keeping those two things in mind, it doesn't turn out to be a punitive thing. You don't want a superintendent dreading the fact that the board's going to do their evaluation. You want it to be a positive conversation moving the district forward. Also, self-evaluation can be a very important part of it. Again, how do you think you're doing as a superintendent, and are there areas that you would like to focus on for improvement? It doesn't have to be in writing. That can be some of the questions during the conversation that you have, or you can ask for it. You can put a piece of it in the evaluation. This is your tool to determine what is going to be best and what information do you need. Okay? There are multiple sources, and these are all listed as to, where do you get the data, how do you get the feedback, and Okay, here's the annual cycle. You start with step one, that's the goal-setting piece that I keep talking about, and you look at, how we're going to plan out the rest of it. Then you have interim progress reports, and Mike, you said quarterly at least. You can have quarterly, you can have monthly. You can each time you have a workshop, let's look at one of the goals and how are we making progress. In the beginning, it won't be progress. It'll be, what's the plan for moving this forward? And that could be part of the conversation. And then step three is when you begin the formal evaluation process, and you have a deadline for that and when it's going to happen. Step four is part of that formal evaluation. Then you debrief. Everybody has their opportunity. They've turned it all in. Now talk about it. What's happened? How did it come about? Why was it that 5 people thought the superintendent was doing it, or 4 people were, I forgot, 5 people. 4 people thought it was an excellent evaluation, and then you have one person that just wasn't quite in the same place. Time to listen and hear why that person. Sometimes it's, oh my gosh, I misunderstood. I thought 1 was the best and 4 was the worst. And other times it's, this is the interaction that I have seen. This is the...
Or I know something you didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes those I know something you don't know is not always a good thing. That can turn into the gotcha. Then you look at the calendar for the next year. How are you going to move forward? What are the action plans? What are the improvement plans? What are some of his goals personally, her goals on this? And then you share it with the community, and you decide how. Are you going to share it in a workshop? Are you going to share it, at a board meeting? It's nice to be able to celebrate a good evaluation and let the community know that not only did we set some really good goals, we have some awesome outcomes. And this is the person that has worked hard in this district to move it forward, and the staff has been phenomenal. Those are great things to be able to share. So,
Well, and I almost think that in our community, because of the level of involvement of the community, and because it's the first time, that there's kind of an expectation, instead of just, oh yeah, everything's going fine. I think there are people who are interested and involved and want to know, what did you measure? How was it measured? Give me the details.
Right.
Don't just tell me, yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Trust but verify.
yeah, exactly. And I will add, on the first evaluation, when you have a superintendent coming in mid-year, because I don't believe your superintendent will be here starting school next week when you haven't finalized the process, the applicants, grant some grace on the first one. The superintendent's coming in, accepting goals that have been put in place, trying to learn the staff, who's going to be the best person to move forward, who's going to be the best one to be responsible for this particular goal, and then go forward. So I would really say grant some grace in the first evaluation. And to top it off, we're coming into a situation where you may have some students online, some students going brick and mortar. That's going to be tough. We have, if you look at the principals, and you do have that right, where you're giving them the option to do virtual. You have some principals now that are essentially running 2 schools. You're going to have a superintendent come in that's essentially running 2 different school districts. Because the rules over here are going to be one thing and the rules over here are going to be another. And how do we merge it? And how do we make sure the progress is happening? So,
With the plan that they had no input in.
exactly.
Yeah, with a plan that's handed to them, with a budget that's handed to them, with a staffing method that's been handed to them, yeah.
And the people, the people that are in those positions. So one of the first, I won't say the first, but an early conversation should be, what are you going to be looking for from the superintendent this year? And there may only be 3 things. It may not be 5, it may only be 3. Hope it's not 10. But I hope it's never them. But look at, and have some conversation, and listen to the superintendent as well. You're probably hiring somebody who has examined your district as well as you have. And so ask for their input in the very beginning. Okay?
Probably somebody who's watching this right now.
More than likely. More than likely. So give them.
Even as we speak.
Yes, give them grace. Look at what your checklist is going to be. You know, what are you going to adopt as a criteria, which we have talked about over and over again? Is there going to be performance pay? That's the part that goes back to, what did you put in the contract in order to include that into the checklist? You're going to collect the data throughout the year. Who's going to be, there are some superintendents that, with the evaluation, the tool that goes out, the superintendent will say, here are the, here's a notebook with the documentation in. Come in and look at it at any time. Or each one of you, here's a book with all of the documentation to support these goals and to support the things that are happening. So you might want to even just talk about, do you do that throughout the year? Or is it, in addition to your monthly or quarterly reports that there's more documentation given? And, like I said, talk about those and identify the relevant documents. Some of the conversation that you may have in the quarterly conversations may not necessarily be what ends up in the final notebook or the final compilation. Okay. If a board sets the district direction and expectations, and then the board hands it off to the superintendent, which is the how, and as the what, you're setting the expectations. The how is the superintendent putting it in place. And then if the board commits to base the superintendent's evaluation on whether or not that job is getting done, then why shouldn't the board spend the majority of their time looking at the things that they've put in place? If those are the priorities, what should you be talking about? At least 50% of your time should be talking about, I'll say at least 30% of your time should be talking about the goals in your strategic plan and the progress you're making. So if all of that is happening and the board's, satisfied with it, and you are actually doing a year-round evaluation process. That's the conversation. That's how you open those lines of communication, and that's how the instrument turns out to be something more than a
Snapshot of
gotcha,
time. Yeah.
and a snapshot in time. We don't like having the tests that the students have to take, the FCAT and FSA, it's been way back since. We don't like that being a one-day snapshot. Why do we want our superintendent's evaluation to be that? The number one complaint in any organization, a large organization, is communication. If you are constantly talking about your goals, about your expectations, and about the effort that's being made and the progress that's being made, communication, at least among the leadership team, is improved. During those conversations, everything that we do is either on YouTube or it's public record or whatever. The communication then is an example of how things are supposed to happen, and it will eventually filter out. Now, the way we do things and the way we have to get our information a week ahead of time, and so, the media sometimes has an opportunity to get stuff out before we have a chance to get it out. So they're always going to have some communication issues that way. But this will solve the majority of the communication problems within the leadership team. So basically, we ask for no surprises when the superintendent's bringing something. The superintendent has asked for no surprises from the dais when you're bringing issues forward. You actually should have no surprises in your evaluation as well. Okay? Now, I'm going to share with
Happy she looks.
Yeah. That's because she's the one giving the surprise.
A happy surprise.
I'm going to share with you, I keep talking about you designed I'm going to share with you an honest, real evaluation. And the evaluation was done for a superintendent that was leaving the district. She had been hired to go to another district. So this was the final evaluation. And they had their tasks, and then their bullets talked about what they were looking for, and then they had a rating. Well, he decided to add to it. This is the impact and rapport building. And he says, public relations, it's kind of a big deal, okay? Tolerance for stress. I'm not going to read them all to you, you can see it, but there was a rating in there, so that, and this is part of the public record for the superintendent's evaluation. But the number was up there as to what they were doing. Work standard. Technical, I was going to say, she wasn't hearing it. So the technical and professional knowledge, there's nothing we can't do if we work harder and never sleep and jerk all other responsibilities in our lives. Okay? So communication. So you really can solve interpersonal problems. Just have effective communication. The more you love your decisions, the less you need to love them. Okay? The next one, the analysis, it's all connected. Oral fact finding. Organization sensitivity. No one threw up today, so it's a good day. Control. Delegation.
Looks like Joe.
Oh, it does.
Dwight Schrute. Dwight Schrute.
And then the overall performance. Congratulations on the new job, you deserve it. Okay, that is not what I would suggest you do as an evaluation,
Right.
but it was an example of one that was put together with a little bit of creativity. So, the perfect superintendent always has the right thing to say, always wears good clothes, buys good books, has impeccable ethics, has a remarkable sense of humor, is 29 years of age with 40 years experience, smiles all the time, visits 15 classes per day, but is always in the office and available for an instant conference, and most importantly, they walk on water. So that's what you're looking for in a superintendent. But the reality is, the perfect superintendent is hard to find. You're looking for the perfect person for your district,
Good luck.
and then your job is to help them be the perfect superintendent. Okay? Are there any questions?
Can you email us this
Yeah,
presentation?
yes, I'm going to get that to Diane, and like I said, there are 4 examples of very simple evaluations, and I will also get those to you. What I would suggest that you do is each one of you look over those evaluations and highlight the things that you like, that you think this is a good thing. It might be the items that are in there, it might be the format, it might be the rating scale, it might be the fact that there's a description of what each of the numbers that they have as their rating would be. So identify those things that you think are good and would be important. And then you can start putting together a tool with the superintendent. Okay? When is your goal to have the superintendent not only hired, but available to start work in the district?
So we have a calendar that even talks about contract.
Yeah, there's
Wait, hold on a minute.
September.
September 22nd.
So the superintendent starts on November 17th. There's
Yeah.
a transition October, November. Contract development starts on September 23rd.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that contract development, evaluation, all it falls together.
Well, the contract evaluation is probably going to happen a little earlier, but think about the things that you
Right.
have seen here that you might want to put in it, because not everything in the contract
Sure.
is going to be evaluated. So think if there are some things that need to go into the contract as you're doing that. Once the contract is signed and you're in place, before they have to take over and hit the ground running, that would be a time to get together with the superintendent and the board all together and say, what are we going to do? What are the things that are our priority? And Mr. or Mrs. Superintendent, what are your strengths? What are you focusing in on as well? And you may find that it's the same thing, and you also may find, oh, okay, but then we want this added also. Okay? And we can help you work through that if you want, or you can pick up and go with it, however you want to work that.
Do you think we need help?
And you don't have to make that decision tonight. You know, you can have some conversation, you know. But we're willing to just sit down, roll up our sleeves and say, all right, let's look at your strategic plan. Let's look at what you have put in the contract. Let's look at a job description for a superintendent, and let's look at policy. So in the meantime, you may want to be looking at both of those. I don't believe you have a job description written, but you have some
And a lot of
things.
those things were purposefully, the advice of FSBA left vague so that they could be taken care of.
In the hiring process, yes.
Yes.
But you will have some expectations
Yes.
of what they
Yes.
do, and that would be a job description. You know, and you might get some help from FADS on a job description for a superintendent, you know, that kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be the same or as rigid as job descriptions that you have for staff, or that you have for, you know, your plant foreman and that type of thing. But, you know, picking up the things that you're looking for in a superintendent that you put in your brochures that you advertise may be part of the job description. So you have yes, like you said, a vague one, but you have it together to talk about how do these things all align. The alignment is the most important part of this. Okay? Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Thanks.
Victoria? Victoria, did you have anything? Sorry, I was just making sure she's still there.
No, I don't have anything, thank you. As long as Carol's going to send that PowerPoint, because when I'm looking at it, it's a few minutes behind, so I need to look at it again. Thank you.
Yeah, and you don't have the copy in your hand either, so, yeah, we'll make sure.
Thank you.
Yep, you'll get electronic presentation and
Perfect.
all of the forms. Okay? And-
Great, thanks.
So I have the form that the council members for Children's Services Council does on their annual evaluation for their executive director, and I'll make copies. They're all public records, but I'll make copies for everybody and send them to you so you can see how they, just so you have some additional insight on how they're doing it.
Okay,
Okay?
perfect. Any other questions, comments for Carol?
Thanks, Carol.
You're very
Yes,
welcome.
thank you very much.
Very welcome. This is such an exciting time for you all. I just hope you're able to sit back, take a breath, and say, yeah, this really is. This really is a good time. So,
Exciting.
yep.
Well, thank
Alrighty.
you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Appreciate it,
Thank
Carol.
you for coming out.
Oh, you're very
Yes,
welcome.
thank you.
Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Are you driving home tonight?
I'm heading, no, actually, I am staying in Tequesta tonight.
Oh, okay, good.
And then heading over to Lee County first thing in the morning,
Oh, perfect.
to be there by noon.
Where are you going to eat tonight?
I do not know.
Wherever you take her.
Wondering.
My sister lives in Tequesta.
Oh,
So
okay.
I am going to go spend a little bit of
Go
time with
visit
her.
sis.
Nice. That'll be
Yeah.
perfect.
So this works. So I'll come back down anytime.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Carol. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so
Go see my
much.
sister again. Okay, I think I've left this in the appropriate. Is your agenda needing to come up again, or are you done?
Diane
No,
does.
no, no, we're
Okay.
fine.
All right,
Okay.
then I'll leave it like that. I'll turn these off so the batteries don't go crazy.
So the only thing we have left is open to the board. Victoria, did you have anything?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Can I ask if Maurice was there to talk about the staffing at all?
Nope.
I thought the superintendent said he was there to present something.
He was here. He didn't present. He just gave us a handout of vacant positions and all that. And I think Diane's going to email that to you. We just got it right here, sitting in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So she'll
Okay,
get,
as far as what I'd like to say, first of all, I want to thank the appointed superintendent Citizen Advisory Committee for the time and effort dedicated to reviewing applications, conducting their research, and participating in meetings. I also want to thank Heather Paget for the employee training planning and presentation. And I wanted to ask the superintendent, I know she's not there right now, but if we could find out, do all the schools have sanitation supplies, personal protective equipment, the air filters, the signage that was needed to protect the health, safety, and well-being of students and staff? Because I'm getting quite a few emails from people saying that they don't have supplies, they don't have signage. So I'm just wanting to ask where we are with all of that. So someone
Victoria,
could get back to me regarding that.
Victoria, have you called the superintendent and asked her that yet?
I've sent I forwarded a couple of emails, but I haven't gotten a response, so that's why I was asking.
Oh, okay.
I forwarded a couple of emails that people have provided me. She did call me about one particular email over the weekend, but I'm just, like I said, I'm getting some information, and maybe the supplies are there. I just don't know. But I kind of want to know, does everybody have what they need? So if she wants to reach out to me or just send me an email letting me know, that's fine.
So do you want
I
me
want
to
to be
send
able to
her,
respond to people when they ask me.
do you want me to
Huh?
send her a text and ask her to call you? Would that help?
That's fine.
Diane,
Either way, she
could
can
you
call me
ask
tomorrow.
Lori to call Victoria to answer her question?
Or Garrett.
Or Garrett? So, can you?
I mean, it might be
Yeah,
better coming from
either
Garrett
one.
because the facility staff is really the ones that are getting all that
Yeah.
out too.
Okay.
Okay.
Then the other thing I want to mention tonight is in these uncertain and trying times when everyone is concerned about the health, safety, and well-being of their families, themselves, and others, it's more important than ever that decisions are made collaboratively. Even the Commissioner of Education has said that when we make decisions that we need to do this with compassion and grace. I believe the district and the union were committed to coming to an agreement regarding the calendar, but when I watched the July 28th negotiations between the district and MCEA, it came down to one individual who created a problem that has impacted the entire school district, staff, students, and families. And to say I am disappointed is an understatement. So I'm making that statement tonight because I'm very discouraged, very disappointed in the way things went. And I want to say that I understand the district had good intentions. I think the union had good intentions. But it does come down to one person that I believe did not do what I would have hoped to have done so that we could have resolved the calendar in a collaborative manner. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Is that all? Did you have anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. DiTerlizzi?
I have nothing, Madam Chairman. But
Thank
thank you. I'll thank the committee also. I was glad to see most of the participants participated through the meetings. I was thankful for all that was appointed and the job they did, along with staff. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I'd like to echo the same thing with the Citizen Search Committee. I mean, they cut through a lot of material there, and it makes our job a whole lot easier as well. And so I appreciate that. And Mrs. Deffenthaler, I agree with you 100%.
Ms. Roberts?
I think I'm good. Of course, thank you to everybody. Thank you for Dr. Miller and her team for getting the reopening plan, and it is approved, and it is online, as well as the other ones that are on there, so.
Thank you. So I just had a couple of things. The Citizen Advisory Committee, thank you all very much. That was a really big task, and looking through them myself, I'm like, wow, they really did a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and I have to say that I mostly agree with their work product. I thought it was excellent, the details, the feedback that I got from committee members, whether they were my appointee or somebody else. It was really, really a great process. And I spoke to Andrea Messina today from FSBA, and she was very complimentary of how the committee went, from the chair to all the people that participated, how organized it was. So I thank them. And then I also had the opportunity to do the welcome at the new educator orientation. That was last week. And I hope I think everyone should have the opportunity to go and do that one morning to welcome them, because it was really exciting. And I have to give kudos to the PD staff. They were so full of energy, and you could just feel it when they were talking with the new teachers, and they were excited, and they were all doing in the chat box. And so that was really exciting, and it was you know, you need that sometimes to remember, you know, and to see their enthusiasm, so it was really great. And, I mean, I think, Ms. Steffenthaler, you know I agree with you on that issue. I have lost all confidence in our ability to effectively negotiate with the union with what we have in place right now. Unfortunately, again, that's not our decision to make. But I echo that, and I have expressed it, and, you know, I think that there are a lot of key positions that are in this district, and that is one of them. And if, you know, the board is, I think, the majority of us have lost that confidence, and it's really sad that we have another year to get through. So I just think we have to be very diligent on keeping things on track. So that's all I can say about that. So,
And I do agree, Chair Powers. I think what we have to do is, as a board, we have to be very direct and very precise in what our message is. So since we have the ultimate power at the end of the day, I think it's the packaging and the, and how we move in that direction. I mean, I think that's the solution, and that's how you solve any issues that you see there.
right. So, anything else from any other board members? We're all good?
I'd like to wish you a happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you so much, and a happy birthday to...
Happy birthday, Marcia.
Thank you, Victoria, and happy birthday to the superintendent today. So,
Oh, it's her happy birthday to the superintendent also.
so, all right, well, thank you all very much, and this workshop is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.